When I was in nursing school long ago, there was a lady that did not want to be resuscitated by all means. Later, she became altered and her family gained power attorney over her. They changed her code status from DNR to full code, even though that was not their mother's wishes. Since they had power attorney over her, we had to follow the children's wishes. The lady went into VFib with no pulse or breathing. We started CPR till the code chart arrived at the bedside. The doctor went to administer a shock, but the machine failed. He tried again and again. The machine would not deliver the shock. The minute she passed on, the machine worked. The hospital checks the defibrillator daily, and it not working has never ever happened before. In the end, the lady ended up getting her wish of no resuscitation. Everyone was freaked out over this. I have been a nurse 20 years and never seen this happen before. Viper Bunny? That's creepy. But at the same time, I am glad she got her wish. My grandpa made it very clear to all of us that if he wasn't going to make it, to let him pass. He even said it the last time I saw him in the hospital. When the time came, my grandmother and mom and aunt and uncle weren't ready, so they allowed him to be intubated. I was so mad at them. They lied about the state of his health, claimed the doctor put off talking to them. It was all lies. I had just been through it. My daughter was born at 29 weeks and we knew something was wrong, but not what. We found out she had trisomy 18. She had been declining, and there was no way she could make it through the night. The last thing I wanted was to let her go, but I couldn't let her suffer, and I couldn't let her die alone in an incubator. I held her until Shen passed. It killed me to do, but I did it because I wanted to do right by her. The fact that my family was so selfish still makes me so angry. I didn't want to lose him either, but keeping him alive in extra weeks was not right. He died 4 months to the day of my daughter's funeral. It was a hard time. When it's someone's time to go, it's their time. Coolthrowaway.jpg. I was 16 and woke up in the middle of the night to seeing my clothes being rustled about in my doorway. After washing my clothes, I like to hang dry them on my doorframe. I noticed some really gray, veiny-looking legs, and then I see these really long, pointed sticks moving through my clothes. It took me a second, but my sleepy eyes adjusted to see one of the most grotesque, demon-looking motherfuckers I have ever seen. He was extremely skinny and had a distended stomach. His skin was gray and veiny, and those long sticks were his fingers. His chin was long. His eyes had no lids on them and were unusually big. His tiny mouth was in a pucker and moved like he was eating an imaginary lollipop. His hunchback looked as though it tore out of the strange hospital gown he was wearing. He just stared at me, and I tried to scream my grandmother awake, who was sharing a room with me for the weekend. He wouldn't stop staring, and I stared back and tried to shake my grandmother awake. I started noticing other things about him, like how large and cone-like his head was, and how hairless and shriveled he looked as he stood still, surprised I could see him. My grandmother woke up, looked towards the door, and he was gone. In the weeks leading to this encounter, I had been experiencing strange things in my house, like my bedroom door slamming and locking on its own. One night I woke up to what felt like several hands touching my feet and legs and horrible nightmares. After the experience with this strange gray man, I told my parents, and they had my room exorcised. I'd eat cake if an exorcism really made those horrible things stop or gave me peace of mind from things I was manifesting myself. All I know is I don't experience those things anymore, and I'll never sleep with the door open again. TL doctor, I saw a demon who was surprised I could see him and had to exorcise my room. Not sure if real or I manifested it in my stressed-out teenage brain. Deleted user, the demon thing sounds like a typical case of sleep paralysis. The following pattern is stereotypical: waking up and to being able to move, an unseen presence in the room, subsequent fear and inability to scream. I've seen zombies come out of a closet, the corpse of my best friend sitting beside my bed, on Christmas Eve no less. When I was younger and hadn't figured out the pattern yet, I met my favorite, the smoke demon. It was like the alien from the Alien series, but with red eyes and with way more spikes. I called him the smoke demon because the lower half of his body was insubstantial, making it so he could float around a room unheard. Typically, I would eventually fall back asleep and somewhat forget the experience, though when it happened again, I immediately remembered the other times. Luckily for me, I started noticing the pattern when I was in my teens and slept in once, experiencing this phenomenon when it was already light outside. In that case, it wasn't the demon I felt, but I thought it was my mum wanting to wake me up for sleeping in. The wanting to scream part was not an expression of fear this time, but of wanting to play a trick on my mum. I thought it would be really clever and funny if I shouted boo just when she was by my bedside. I then noticed I wasn't able to move, which freaked me out. Also, there was no mother. Then the gears started to turn, and I've never really had a problem with sleep paralysis episodes. Long story short, I hope you sleep in once in a while and have your grandmother to wake you up. Chaotic tundra? The strange gray man. Clara cut through the old neighborhood. Its buildings constructed of old bricks and red shingled roofs. The street was in poor condition. The sidewalks even worse, but Clara didn't notice. She wandered through the gray fog, glancing at the disarray of houses. This place sent a shiver down her spine that she couldn't place. Perhaps it was simply paranoia. As she gazed about, she noticed the eerily empty streets, porches lacking people, even sound itself seemed to halt. Quickly she glanced around. No one. Glancing behind, she thought she could make something out through the thick gray fog. Peering deeper to the point of strain, she could barely make out a frame. A tall man stood behind, wearing a foreign dirty white jacket. He seemed to stand with a hunch and did not seem to be moving. Clara almost called out to him before her words caught in her mouth. Perhaps I shouldn't disturb the old man, she thought, and continued her journey through the few remaining blocks in this old neighborhood. Approaching her new apartment building, she began climbing the 3 flights of stairs to a carpeted hallway with old wallpaper and wooden doors. Walking along the path, she counted the doors: 301, 302, 303, 304, 305. Ah, my apartment! She hurriedly unlocked it and entered. This dingy 2-room apartment was all hers, although even her joy couldn't mask the condition of the building. The wallpaper was dirty and peeling, the carpet a brown instead of cream, and a slight stench that she couldn't place. She opened the window in the main room to air the place out and turning headed for the bedroom. She began removing her jacket and hanging it when she heard a loud noise. Thud. She entered the main room to find the window shut, and as she approached, discovered it locked. Strange, she thought, but paid it no more mind. As she watched out the window at the street, she thought she could see someone on the street corner through the thick fog, gazing up at her. She quickly put the thought aside and began preparing her dinner. She had been laying in bed asleep for a few hours when her eyes cracked and the green glow of her clock blinded her. What time is it? She groggily thought. After staring at the clock for a minute, she could make out the time: 4:55 a.m. The room was dark, and she laid her head down to drift back into bliss when she heard it. A soft rusting by her door. Her eyes drifted slowly to the doorframe. She first saw the feet, the thin, veiny legs, pale gray as if there was no blood. His legs vanished behind what appeared to be a dirty hospital gown, not even capable of containing his full frame. His arms were but gray flesh stretched across long bone, his long bony fingers stretched around the door's frame with an almost strengthless hold. His back protruded out the back of the gown in a hunch, contrasting with the gray fog that seemed to cower behind him. His head, even with the hunch, sat mere inches from the top of the doorway. His eyes, large and black, sat above a flattened nose. His lips a pale outline around rotted teeth. His face seemed longer, as if his jaw could unhinge to do terrible things. His eyes watched her, a slight surprise showing in them. Clara lay in bed trying to scream, to move, to do anything. As hard as she tried, she could not bring her eyes from his. They sat still for minutes, gazing at each other, fear countered by malice. Before a crunch of snow on the streets below echoed through the window. Her head turned for but a second before her focus reset to the door. He was gone, leaving behind only a feeling of those large black eyes watching, always watching.
La_Minuit. When I was in elementary school, my family decided to add on to our house. So, we hired an architect and contractor. We live in an old colonial home that was built to be historically correct, 200-year-old softwood floors, proper paint colors, etc. Because of this, my parents chose to have all of the wood trim painted in the addition. The contractor didn't want to because we actually bought quality wood and he thought it was a waste of time. So, we ended up hiring another contractor after about a year of arguing and having almost no work done on the house, even though the contractor and his team were consistently being paid. The new contractor was one that my parents' lawyer had met through church. Most of his team also went to that same church. Now, we always tried to be hospitable towards the workmen and would offer them drinks and snacks, particularly in the summer. We live in a hot, humid climate that is pretty much unbearable. So, my mom would send me outside with lemonade and the like for the workers. They were all really nice, and I remember having nice conversations with them about whatever now 9-year-old me found interesting. I particularly remember this one guy named Kenny. The actually contractor never showed up on the job, and Kenny was put in charge. Kind of like a gopher? He was always really nice to me. Anyways, a few months after they finally finished the addition on our house, I think it took about 2.5 years, Kenny's name is published in the newspaper. He was put in prison for charges of pedophilia. Before he worked at our house, he had been on a list of sex offenders. The contractor found this detail about his employee unnecessary to share with my parents. I was an elementary-aged girl at the time, my brother was in middle school. My parents would leave us home alone with the workman there on occasion. Thinking about this still gives me the creeps. I can't edit a word. Edit 2, the number of people with similar experiences is kind of frightening. It's good to see that none of the people who've replied were actually assaulted, but still creepy to think that those people are out there. Anatha tyrant. When I was 8 or so, we had family temporary living with us on multiple occasions. This time it was my uncle's brother-in-law and mother-in-law. The mother was an obese chain smoker who laid around the house, and her son was just strange. He was in his mid-20s and still sucked his thumb and wet the bed, and he stared at my sister, who was 10 at the time, and me. Just stared. We both agreed to avoid him because he was weird and creepy. They lived with us for a few weeks before they were able to get their own place. Everything was back to normal until a few weeks later, police showed up pounding on our door, demanding to know where the guy was. Apparently he had been caught playing truth or dare with a pair of 7 and 9-year-old girls, daring them to take their clothes off and touch him. It just gives me the heebie-jeebies that he lived and slept in my house, one room away from mine. Maggio. In the mid-90s my little brother and I were playing in our front yard while my dad was changing the oil of his car in the garage. I was about 7 years old and my brother was about 3 or 4 years old. I was teaching him how to ride his tricycle. Our garage door was open but our house was built at an angle so you would see the yard and us kids first while pulling up to it and then the garage. My dad went inside the house for a second to get a glass of water because I remember it being an exceptionally hot day. That moment a truck pulled up along our curb, a Hispanic-looking man jumped out and yelled over at us, "Hey, you want to buy some fish?" As a 7-year-old girl I thought that was just an honest offer so I started walking towards the garage to get my dad to ask him if he wanted to buy fish. I know it sounds stupid now but it didn't when I was 7. I had my back to my little brother, as I walked towards the house. At the same moment my dad came running out of the house, tools in hand screaming, "Hey, get out of here." I turned around and saw the man was reaching towards my little brother but quickly got back in his truck and sped away when he saw my dad coming. It was absolutely terrifying, and I am scared to this day to think of what could have happened. Logical pagan. Eep. Something like this happened to a family member when she was about 12. Her sports coach, about a 30-something-year-old man, bought her a really expensive nice fur jacket for Christmas, had his computer desktop a picture of her in a bathing suit from a pool party he threw for her team, and picked her up after school to get her a cell phone to hang out with her and keep in contact when he knew her mom was busy. When her mom found out she just pulled her out of the team instead of telling the other girl's parents. Thankfully nothing bad happened but when I found out I was so angry she didn't do anything about it. Deleted user. This is kind of weird. We had contractors who worked on our house in the same scenario. We would give them water and such. One of them said he has a go-kart he was building and I should come over to check it out. I asked my mom and she said yes, for some reason. So we drive to this guy's house which was actually kind of far away. I remember going into his house and his wife and daughter were there. He made me a sandwich. Then said something very strange to his wife that I didn't realize was strange at the time. What? You said I can't bring home little girls anymore. I just remember his wife and daughter seeming to be really afraid of him. We then check out the go-kart which was totally badass. Then he drove me home. He asked me a couple of more times if I wanted to go somewhere with him to get supplies and such and I always said no because of how his wife and daughter acted. My whole family ended up going there to check out his go-kart, kit car thing and I was still uneasy with him around even though my dad and mom were there.
We start with Juicy Toaster. It's not something I tell people on a daily basis. But when I was little, I'm going to say 7 or 8, I woke up to a banging on the window. At first I figured it was just the wind and tried to shrug it off to go back to sleep. But I kept hearing footsteps in my room. My room had a large enough area for you to walk in circles in front of my bed. You know, the kind of noises that are just supposed to be the house settling in. It sounded like someone was circling my room. I used to sleep with the radio on, and at this very moment it was playing a very depressing song that I can't remember the name of, but if I hear it on the radio, I get the creeps still. So that really started to scare me. The room also felt as if it was getting colder. At this point I was really scared. I decided to make a run for it to my parents' room down the hall. As I passed through the area where the foots were, I got so incredibly cold that I could see my breath and I froze for a sec only to hear the words, "I'm lost." I bolted to my parents' room, hid under their bed and cried myself to sleep. User absolutely no shame. When I was about 13 years old, our dog ran away from home. This happened a few times, as the gate in the back was left open due to family members being careless and not ensuring it closed all the way, and she got out. Usually not a big deal. The neighborhood we were in was a pretty okay neighborhood, and I could usually find her not that far away sniffing at things, usually in the alleys behind houses, as that's where people set out their trash, etc., etc. She was just curious, and the minute she'd see me, she'd drop whatever she was after and come straight to me. We'd head home. No biggie. This one time it happened, though. I went looking for her and couldn't find her. I started to get a bad feeling and kept looking, probably a good 6 blocks away. Further than she'd ever roamed before was an area with a bunch of townhomes rental properties. She'd never gone that far before, and I was nearly in tears, ready to give up and go home to wait for her to hopefully find her way back this time instead. As I'd been out probably for almost an hour trying to find her at this point, walking around, when I saw some slight movement behind a wooden fence and thought I heard a yip. In this random person's backyard was my dog. She was muddy and wet, and they'd chained her to a post in the yard. She was pulling at the chain, barking and trying to get to me. It was pretty far away, so I assumed that the people had decided to take her in, having seen her running around or something. I knew it was her because she was my dog, damn it. And I knew it was her, and also she had her collar on. I'll never forget what happened next. I rang the doorbell. An older dude, Asian, opened the door after I rang the bell a second time, having given it a good 20 seconds and hearing people inside yelling, talking. Yes, he said, looking at me through a crack in his door. Hi, my name is Absolutely No Shame, and I'm here about my dog. I'm so happy you found her, and thank you for getting her off the streets. He looked at me suspiciously. What dog? He said, staring at me. What, my dog? The little white dog you have in your backyard, I replied. I was starting to get really creeped out at this point. We have no dog here, he said, and tried to close the door on me. That fucker. I stopped the door with my foot. The dog in your backyard, right there. I was getting louder at this point as I was starting to panic a little. I pointed towards his backyard and my dog started to bark frantically. He looked in the direction I was pointing, looked back at me, sort of made a disappointed or annoyed grimace and said, "Oh, that dog," rather unconvincingly. Then he left the doorway. I was totally mystified and more than a little frightened at this point. So I went back around to the yard and was ready to climb over the fence and just take my dog back myself when he came to the patio door of his yard, stepped into the yard with her. She cowered far, far away from him, I noticed, and unchained her from the post, then stepped over and opened his gate. She booked it to me and pretty much leapt into my arms as I kneeled down to meet her, and the old dude just wordlessly walked back inside with a scowl on his face. I have no idea what would have happened if I hadn't wandered out that far to find her, but he didn't seem to have any intention of returning her or calling the pound or anything. Her collar had a license tag, information on it, as well as her owner's information on another tag, so his family could have dealt with it, but it didn't seem like they had any intention of doing so. I got the worst feeling from that guy. After that, if she ever got out of the yard again, she was never more than about 50 feet from the house/fence boundaries. We even found her waiting patiently outside the gate to the backyard once. TLDR, this guy had either rescued or stolen my dog, tried to deny it, was super shady, and I'll never know why. Edit, accidentally a word. Edit 2, apparently I used a derogatory term. Apologies. User banker goes raw. Experience. My grandfather's company does timber mining, was setting up an office in a relatively remote part of a third world county, and found a house that was dirt cheap, even for third world country standards. Obviously there was a catch. The villagers in that area told him not to purchase it, since the house was haunted and everyone who had ever lived there died violently. He decided it was just some superstitious BS and got it anyway. So the guy setting up the office will live on the top floor of the house with this family, and the lower floors for the office. He moved in with his wife and 3 kids. Anyway, my grandfather suddenly got no news from him for the longest time. Since this was in a remote part of a third world country, he wasn't too worried since he just assumed they lost power or something. He finally contacted the local police to go check on the guy since he was completely unreachable. They found everyone dead. Apparently the guy killed his wife, kids, and then himself with a machete. Yes, not a gun. A fucking machete. He actually hacked himself to death. It wasn't one of those cuts on the wrists to let everyone slowly bleed to death. Everyone was hacked down, including the guy himself. The description of the scene had to be an exaggeration, since I'm assuming the sight of 5 decapitated bodies, including 3 kids, was scary enough to make people see things, so I won't bother putting it here since I'm not sure what's true and there were details that people could not have witnessed. Let's just say I stopped paying attention after I heard the phrase magic machete. I was told entire room was covered in blood, including the ceiling. Some people were saying the blood on the ceiling had to have gotten there because the spirits threw the bodies around. I had to explain about blood pressure and got tons of weird looks. Now the weird part, if this isn't weird enough, was that he managed to barricade the door with the bed with his wife and kids on it. And it's one of those gigantic old beds that's extremely hard to move. The locals say this is evidence he was possessed by spirits. I say moving to the middle of nowhere in some third world country drove the guy nuts, and crazy people can do all sorts of crazy shit and even perform crazy feats of strength. Anyway, my grandfather had to pay a few bribes to make sure nothing gets to the press, not hard, middle of nowhere, about the entire thing, and get the police to classify the deaths as natural. No idea how they'll explain that third world countries are awesome. All employees in the know had to sign an NDA too. He then tried getting other volunteers to set up the office, even if they haven't heard all the gory details because of my grandfather's gag order. Everyone knew the previous guy died. No one volunteered. He promoted one guy, gave him a fancy title and told him he's in charge of setting up that office. The guy quit. We start with Juicy Toaster. It's not something I tell people on a daily basis, but when I was little, I'm going to say 7 or 8, I woke up to a banging on the window. At first I figured it was just the wind and tried to shrug it off to go back to sleep. But I kept hearing footsteps in my room. My room had a large enough area for you to walk in circles in front of my bed. You know, the kind of noises that are just supposed to be the house settling in. It sounded like someone was circling my room. I used to sleep with the radio on, and at this very moment it was playing a very depressing song that I can't remember the name of, but if I hear it on the radio, I get the creeps still. So that really started to scare me. The room also felt as if it was getting colder. At this point I was really scared. I decided to make a run for it to my parents' room down the hall. As I passed through the area where the foots were, I got so incredibly cold that I could see my breath and I froze for a sec only to hear the words, "I'm lost." I bolted to my parents' room, hid under their bed and cried myself to sleep. User, absolutely no shame. When I was about 13 years old, our dog ran away from home. This happened a few times, as the gate in the back was left open due to family members being careless and not ensuring it closed all the way, and she got out. Usually not a big deal. The neighborhood we were in was a pretty okay neighborhood, and I could usually find her not that far away sniffing at things, usually in the alleys behind houses, as that's where people set out their trash, etc., etc. She was just curious, and the minute she'd see me, she'd drop whatever she was after and come straight to me. We'd head home. No biggie. This one time it happened, though. I went looking for her and couldn't find her. I started to get a bad feeling and kept looking, probably a good 6 blocks away. Further than she'd ever roamed before was an area with a bunch of townhomes rental properties. She'd never gone that far before, and I was nearly in tears, ready to give up and go home to wait for her to hopefully find her way back this time instead. As I'd been out probably for almost an hour trying to find her at this point, walking around, when I saw some slight movement behind a wooden fence and thought I heard a yip. In this random person's backyard was my dog. She was muddy and wet, and they'd chained her to a post in the yard. She was pulling at the chain, barking and trying to get to me. It was pretty far away, so I assumed that the people had decided to take her in, having seen her running around or something. I knew it was her because she was my dog, damn it. And I knew it was her, and also she had her collar on. I'll never forget what happened next. I rang the doorbell. An older dude, Asian, opened the door after I rang the bell a second time, having given it a good 20 seconds and hearing people inside yelling, talking. Yes, he said, looking at me through a crack in his door. Hi, my name is Absolutely No Shame, and I'm here about my dog. I'm so happy you found her, and thank you for getting her off the streets. He looked at me suspiciously. What dog? He said, staring at me. What, my dog? The little white dog you have in your backyard, I replied. I was starting to get really creeped out at this point. We have no dog here, he said, and tried to close the door on me. That fucker. I stopped the door with my foot. The dog in your backyard, right there. I was getting louder at this point as I was starting to panic a little. I pointed towards his backyard and my dog started to bark frantically. He looked in the direction I was pointing, looked back at me, sort of made a disappointed or annoyed grimace and said, "Oh, that dog," rather unconvincingly. Then he left the doorway. I was totally mystified and more than a little frightened at this point. So I went back around to the yard and was ready to climb over the fence and just take my dog back myself when he came to the patio door of his yard, stepped into the yard with her. She cowered far, far away from him, I noticed, and unchained her from the post, then stepped over and opened his gate. She booked it to me and pretty much leapt into my arms as I kneeled down to meet her, and the old dude just wordlessly walked back inside with a scowl on his face. I have no idea what would have happened if I hadn't wandered out that far to find her, but he didn't seem to have any intention of returning her or calling the pound or anything. Her collar had a license tag, information on it, as well as her owner's information on another tag, so his family could have dealt with it, but it didn't seem like they had any intention of doing so. I got the worst feeling from that guy. After that, if she ever got out of the yard again, she was never more than about 50 feet from the house/fence boundaries. We even found her waiting patiently outside the gate to the backyard once. TLDR, this guy had either rescued or stolen my dog, tried to deny it, was super shady and I'll never know why. Edit, accidentally a word. Edit 2, apparently I used a derogatory term. Apologies, user banker goes raw, experience. My grandfather's company does timber mining, was setting up an office in a relatively remote part of a third world county, and found a house that was dirt cheap, even for third world country standards. Obviously there was a catch. The villagers in that area told him not to purchase it since the house was haunted and everyone who had ever lived there died violently. He decided it was just some superstitious BS and got it anyway. So the guy setting up the office will live on the top floor of the house with this family, and the lower floors for the office. He moved in with his wife and 3 kids. Anyway, my grandfather suddenly got no news from him for the longest time. Since this was in a remote part of a third world country, he wasn't too worried since he just assumed they lost power or something. He finally contacted the local police to go check on the guy since he was completely unreachable. They found everyone dead. Apparently the guy killed his wife, kids, and then himself with a machete. Yes, not a gun. A fucking machete. He actually hacked himself to death. It wasn't one of those cuts on the wrists to let everyone slowly bleed to death. Everyone was hacked down, including the guy himself. The description of the scene had to be an exaggeration, since I'm assuming the sight of 5 decapitated bodies, including 3 kids, was scary enough to make people see things, so I won't bother putting it here since I'm not sure what's true and there were details that people could not have witnessed. Let's just say I stopped paying attention after I heard the phrase magic machete. I was told entire room was covered in blood, including the ceiling. Some people were saying the blood on the ceiling had to have gotten there because the spirits threw the bodies around. I had to explain about blood pressure and got tons of weird looks. Now the weird part, if this isn't weird enough, was that he managed to barricade the door with the bed with his wife and kids on it. And it's one of those gigantic old beds that's extremely hard to move. The locals say this is evidence he was possessed by spirits. I say moving to the middle of nowhere in some third world country drove the guy nuts, and crazy people can do all sorts of crazy shit and even perform crazy feats of strength. Anyway, my grandfather had to pay a few bribes to make sure nothing gets to the press, not hard, middle of nowhere, about the entire thing, and get the police to classify the deaths as natural. No idea how they'll explain that third world countries are awesome. All employees in the know had to sign an NDA too. He then tried getting other volunteers to set up the office, even if they haven't heard all the gory details because of my grandfather's gag order. Everyone knew the previous guy died. No one volunteered. He promoted one guy, gave him a fancy title and told him he's in charge of setting up that office. The guy quit.
One night when I was 13 years old, I had gotten my period for the first time and ended up sleeping on my back. I am an avid side sleeper, so this is a really weird position for me. I was dreaming, and in that dream I was sitting in a chair. I leaned it back on its back legs, and suddenly the chair started to slowly lean further and further back until I drifted into the eternity below me. This freaked me out and I jolted awake. When I awoke, there was a figure hovering directly above my face, and all I saw was a hooded white, flat, ovular, and relatively featureless face, with big, ovular, glassy eyes and an expression like it was determined to devour my eternal soul. The face was humanoid, very two-dimensional, with thin, quivering, angry lips and 2 holes where its nose would be, with eyebrows arched high up onto its forehead. I could feel an unworldly hate burning right through me as it loomed over me. It was absolutely the most helpless I have ever felt, and would ever feel, because it was more than just my life I felt was at stake. I tried to move, scream, breathe, anything, and couldn't. It was paralyzing me with its hate. I finally was able to let out the tiniest whimper, and as soon as the sound escaped me, it stood straight up and paced back and forth at the foot of my bed, still staring. It was like a force field was erected around me, and the frustration of it trying to get at me again was radiating throughout the room. It looked like a starving tiger behind glass, longing to lunge at its vulnerable prey. If only it weren't for the barrier between us. It was tall, almost all the way to the ceiling tall, and very thin, wearing a long black cloak that covered everything except that terrifying face. I realized that it hadn't been floating over me, that it stood at the foot of my bed and leaned over it to hover its face over mine. I sat up in my bed, still frozen, just staring at it. My closet door behind it was cracked a few inches, and it swooped in there and peered out at me, never having broken eye contact. It continued to stare, quivering with hate and frustration until it slowly faded away. I turned my light on, and it stayed on at night for a long time. I never slept with that closet door open again, and I didn't sleep again that night. I stayed the night in the living room with all of the lights on, just sitting on the couch. I later dismissed it as sleep paralysis for several years. It was a very believable and plausible explanation. Then I became friends with a girl who confided in me and told me a story. She was up late at night by herself with her door open. Something out in the living room by the kitchen caught her eye, and when she looked at it, she saw a figure standing there, beckoning her to approach it. She looked away, refocused on it, and it was still there. When she described it, she described the exact same creature that had attacked me. We each got a sketchbook and drew what we saw. When she showed me hers, I was staring at my attacker all over again. She had never heard my story before telling hers. TLDR, was attacked by a scary figure one night. Dismissed it as sleep paralysis until a friend described the exact same creature to me that had plagued her. She didn't know about my experience until after she had told me about hers. I'm having a hard time finding exactly what I saw, but this face is pretty similar. Just flatten the nose cheekbones into nothing and close the mouth into a thin line with bigger, more rounded eyes. Deleted user. We were living with my grandparents at the time. In my aunt's room was a 2-foot-tall Victorian-style doll converted into a lamp. The lamp would only turn on by holding the doll's cold plastic hand and raising and lowering the arm. The doll stood on a nightstand next to my aunt's bed, facing the door, greeting everyone who entered with a creepy dead-eye smile. I was alone in the house one day and wanted a blanket from my aunt's closet. Luckily for this scaredy cat, there were 2 important factors that worked in my favor. 1, it was mid-afternoon and wouldn't need the lamp's light, and 2, the closet was located immediately next to the door's entrance. So without lifting my gaze, I stared at the floor, entered the room, and turned 180 degrees. Now my back was towards the doll. I quickly swung open the closet door and reached down for a blanket when suddenly something about the room was different, brighter. The light was on and the peach fuzz hairs on the back of my neck uncurled. I froze for an eternity, then felt my survival instinct kick in and wanted to run screaming in horror. But before all that, I still had to look. Man, I wish I hadn't looked. As I turned to exit the room, I lifted my stupid head only to confirm that the doll's hand was raised and that it was pointed directly at me. Such traumatizing vision burned in my brain since I was 13. Much uneasy, creepy memory. Now to the next story. A few years ago, there was a small plane accident that occurred in a neighboring town. I was part of the county volunteer search and rescue group, and when we got the call, I was one of the responders to help try and see if there was any chance of a survivor from the crash. We found out from the sheriff that was there that it was an elderly couple and their young granddaughter that were in this plane. Immediately, it went dead silent. You could see the life drain from the other responders' faces as soon as it was said. Upon getting to the area that the crash happened at, it was clear that there would be no survivors from this accident. It wouldn't have a happy ending. There would be no joyful and tear-filled reunion. This plane was absolutely destroyed. Our lead turned to the group and said if anybody was uncomfortable or not willing to do the recovery of the bodies, there would be no hard feelings or anything held against them. Some people just aren't cut out for this. About half of the group said they couldn't do it. They helped set up the rappelling lines, made some radio calls to other teams that were lower on the hillside, helping us navigate through the broken trees and aircraft parts to get to where we expected to find the bodies. I'll never forget the feeling of complete, utter numbness I experienced that day. The first thing any of us saw was this small stuffed teddy bear and the blood that had soaked onto it. When we finally were able to get down to the bodies, we had to stop and collect ourselves. It was heartbreaking to see this little girl with such empty, devoid eyes. She was gone, never to grow up and experience life like most of us had, never to know the joys, aches, frustrations, sadness, excitement, and everything else life throws at you. I've seen a lot in my few years as an EMT. I've seen drug overdoses, diabetic shock, car crashes, suicides of all manners. But this fucked me up for a while. Nobody should have to go through what we went through to help bring closure for the family. Nobody should have to deal with bringing back a child in a body bag. But if I don't stand up and do it, someone else has to bear the heartache, the depression, the numbness. And I don't ever want someone else to experience it like I did.
Blazing Arpeggio. It was around last year. We had a friend that went missing for almost a week. We weren't really that close, and he lives in a campus dorm, so I really didn't know till that night. My housemate saw a report from the university's FB page that there were a couple of bodies found in a spring at the far edge of the campus. Our university is located beside a mountain. We all started to worry, especially when I learned that he really had been missing. We were anxious for news to come, and when the reports of the initial ID came in, we were shocked. He was one of them. The report misspelled his last name, but we knew it was him. Panic mode. My housemates and I went out to meet with his dormmates, while I called a couple of our friends that went straight to the springs. They weren't able to see him there, since when they got there, the police already took the bodies for autopsy. At that point, we couldn't do anything but wait for further news. It turns out that the two of them went swimming there the weekend before and drowned. Their bodies got really bloated from being soaked for days, and crustaceans started to eat away their skins. It really seemed at first that it was a frat initiation gone bad, because they both looked like they were covered in lashes. It's a very fucked up way to die. R.I.P. Kevin, Jimman4220. I was running my cable route in the inner city. Between jobs I realized I had to shit now. Unfortunately, the nearest quick trip is like 5 miles away. Tired 367 light years in city travel, so I gamble and hit the nearest gas station. I get there, and of course there's a line to the one unisex bathroom. A dude, a chick, and myself are hanging around making small talk, but mentally I am an absolute shit-squeezing wreck. After about 5 minutes, the dude goes into full-on rage panic and starts trying to rip the door open, making the most demonic screeches. The woman in the bathroom is freaking out. The chick next to me is freaking out, and just as I step in to give him a WTF bro, it was like he got hit with a jolt of electricity and fell. Luckily I caught him, but at this point I realize he's having a seizure. I cannot describe the feeling I felt looking into this gentleman's eyes, crying blood, foaming at the mouth and flailing about that I was just having a conversation with. The elderly woman in the restroom happens to be a retired nurse, go figure, and promptly instructs bystanders and I how to handle the situation, and the paramedics arrive towards the end of his fit. Turns out his alcoholicism was linked with his epilepsy or some shit, and he was waiting in line to sneak a swig of the flask in his coat pocket. Info from his wife. Never would have expected it. Dude seemed cool as fuck, well-dressed and groomed, all that jazz. The ordeal ends and I tell the woman it's her turn to use the restroom, to which she declines from being freaked the fuck out. I, however, drop the most contemplated and beautiful deuce in the dirtiest bathroom of the metro area. Maybe it's not that scary, but seizures scare the brother-loving piss out of me. And I think some people's personal lives are too much for me. This is one of 2 insane instances where I happen to be in the wrong place at the right time due to minor unusual route delays. Dynamic solo. I had a similar experience. I know how you felt. I was working at a mechanic shop, and this day everyone had called out sick except me and the manager. Our truck delivery guy pulls in, backs up to the garage door to drop off tires. Everything goes well, like every other delivery he has done. I am doing my normal, hey, how are you today? Weather sucks, nice, moderate, whatever, while I am signing the receipt. I notice he isn't responding to me, so I look up and he is looking into the sky like he was scratching his head, but stopped mid-stroke. Looks like he saw a ghost or something, so I look up, don't see anything. Hey, you alright? He then slowly starts falling back stiff as a board. Holy shit. I drop papers and do my best to catch him. I was a weak stick figure and he was a husky man. I didn't succeed in stopping his fall. Flat on his back, head smacked the pavement. Seizure begins. I grab hold of his hand and neck, not knowing what the fuck to do but yell out my manager's name to call 911. He was foaming and spitting all over me, eyes rolled back. I didn't care he was spitting in my face. I just kept holding onto him, staring at him, hoping that would help. I didn't know what else to do. I just kept worrying for this man that he was going to die in my hands, and there was nothing I could have done. He eventually stopped and immediately woke up. He had no idea what was going on, but he knew who me and my manager were, which was good, so he didn't flip out. Ambulance shows up and takes him away. I tried to go to the hospital when I got off work to visit him, but they had already sent him home. I just kept thinking, holy shit, I'm glad he is okay. And what if that had happened while he was driving? Holly Holden. My boyfriend has epilepsy. That shit is scary. He hasn't had a seizure with me yet because his medicine is really awesome, but I have no idea how I would deal if he did. He told me before we lived together all the typical stuff: lay him on his side, don't try to put anything in his mouth, wait 5 minutes before calling an ambulance. When I moved in, we talked about it more, and I told him I wanted to watch a video of someone seizing to be prepared better. The video itself wasn't scary, but imagining him like that is just horrifying. It's not like in movies at all. The person just looks so helpless but volatile at the same time, like a rabid dog tied up or something. TBH, I don't think I'll be able to wait 5 minutes to call 911 if he has one with me. Buckfast69. Yeah, it's really weird to witness. One of my best friends has a very serious chronic epilepsy that has no triggers. He literally could, at the worst of it, maybe have 1 or 2 seizures a day. He didn't even go home afterwards most of the time due to how regular they became. Anyway, yeah, it's pretty scary at first. I think for me the weirdest thing is their sudden lack of consciousness. All of a sudden, emergency situation and you're alone. One good thing is that there really isn't much you can do wrong. Like you said, you can turn them on their side or put a pillow/shirt jack under their head to prevent further damage from trashing. The only other things you can really do for really bad fits is attempt to identify the victim's tongue without touching it, obviously, in order to make sure they haven't swallowed it, and pinch their earlobe to try get a response from them. This is obviously particularly helpful to identify if the victim is okay, if they had a particularly bad fall and hit their head. I used to always talk to my friend while he was unconscious, just reassuring him, holding his hand, etc. I'm not sure that does anything, but I'd like to think it calms them subconsciously. At least it kept me calm. Manford 20. One night on my way home from work, around 11 p.m., my mom texted me and asked me if I could pick up some milk on the way home. Super unusual, but what the hell? I'm always up for an adventure. Little did I know what this milk gathering adventure would entail. So I get the milk, blaze a bowl, and I'm headed home on a back road with some small turns and moderate hills with 3 cars traveling in a pack a few hills ahead of me. Then out of nowhere, I see these lights illuminating the cornfield to the right, go up into the sky, and then light up the plain to my left. My strange music was up way too loud to hear the happenings, but I seriously thought I was about to get abducted by aliens. I didn't know what the fuck was going on. So I pass a couple hills and have a laugh at myself for being a dumbass. As I'm coming around the bend, I see this car in the ditch upside down, wheels still spinning, and the other 2 cars in the pack continuing up the road. Still haunts me to this day. Why in God's left-handed fuck wouldn't they stop? I end up passing it out of awe and had to flip a bitch up the road. I pull up, flip my high beams and hazards on, and run over to the car and immediately start checking for fuel leaks. Was none. And I round the car to find this girl covered in blood, 4 feet away from the car. In my head, I'm thinking, oh God, she's dead. Fuck, shit, she's dead. When I reach down to check for a pulse, she lets out this giant bloody gasp for air, and I about shit my pants. She sees me and starts reaching. I'm like, relax, just hold still. As I'm accessing her injury, she's telling me about a baby squirrel. And she swerved, and in my brain I get that she's a sweet, innocent girl. But is a squirrel worth your life? Ugh. So I figure she's probably okay to move. I pull her over to the driveway about 8 feet away, in the light and on a flat surface, and call 911. I grab one of my friend's hoodies out of my truck and put it under her head. I'm comforting her and talking to her, and she asked me to call her mom and boyfriend. She was leaving the BFS house. So I talked to them, went a lot better than expected. The owner of the driveway comes out 10 minutes later and is like, "The fuck happened?" After I explain he feels the need to go get his wife and kids. People start driving by asking if they can do anything. One lady actually gave me her phone number so I could update her afterwards. I suddenly realize how calm this young girl is being. Laying there, struggling to breathe, covered in blood, talking to me as she weren't in severe pain or that anything had happened. It was amazing. I don't even know why it was so amazing, but it just blew my mind. The driveway guy shows up. I ask him to stay with her while I start clearing the road. Books, papers, clothes, shoes, purse, spare tire, headlight, taillight, shards of glass, a mirror, damn near everything but the seats flew out of this bitch. Shortly after, the paramedics show up and posted on my truck, G as can be. Baggy-ish clothes and shit, not a friendly appearance. Her mom pulls up behind me and she jumps out like, "Who the fuck are you?" I'm the guy you spoke on the phone with, and gave her the number of the concerned woman. She just kind of scoffs, runs over and starts getting in the paramedics' way. I get it. I'm a parent myself, but don't fuck with these guys. They can do a much better job than you. I see this as a splendid opportunity to fire up a cigarette from afar, give all the troopers all the information I can give, and then the BF pulls up. Who the fuck are you? Really? So we do that whole spiel again, but this time it's different. Dude hugs me, crying, and thanks me. I didn't even know how to respond. It was a solid bromance, very positive. So the coppers give me the go-ahead to split, and I walk over to the girl on the stretcher. She grabs my hand and whispers, "Thank you." I just smile and head to my truck. I still kick myself in the ass for not getting her name or anything. I'm fairly certain she's okay though. Boils down to 16, yo girl, swerved for a squirrel. Rolled 3 times, broken ribs, was wearing a seatbelt and crawled out of the open window before she passed out. Had I not stopped to get milk, she would have been laying in the field for roughly 15-20 minutes. Moral of the story, don't swerve for animals. Quit leaving your goddamn clothes in my truck or I will get blood on them, and for fuck's sakes, just help people.
Reddit, what is your most disturbing, scary, or creepy real story? Isominalum. My friend was changing really quick behind one of those stands that sells stuff in the day. It was around 3 a.m., so we thought it was clear. We all looked away and she was changing, when all of a sudden she screams and we see this dude out of nowhere, coming out from the closed stand. He sees all of us and we all look at him, and he just slowly creeps backwards into his stand, which apparently he lives in. It was all closed up and everything. You wouldn't suspect someone living inside of his own shop. Deleted user. I've been having a number of sleep paralysis moments the past year, but haven't yet encountered the shadowy people, as mine always took place during a nap in the afternoon while slouched on a couch. It's the worst feeling in the world to be fully awake, but the rest of your body is still sleeping and won't respond. I have a toy poodle. Occasionally I would have her lie on my stomach cause it's warm and all snuggly. She doesn't care for it too much though, and would jump off as soon as I released my hug/grip. She would normally listen if I ask her to stay or sit somewhere, but she never responds to my calls of coming onto my stomach. One afternoon I drifted into a nap and felt my body go out of sync again. I panicked. All of a sudden, just as I was about to be fully aware of my sleep paralysis, my poodle barks, and not only hops onto my stomach of her own will, but proceeded to fully lie down while staring at the wall. Her actions jolted me awake. It's more of a weird encounter than anything, but with all the stories attached to sleep paralysis, the smells, the shadow people, the tall man and the old woman, it's pretty disturbing to me. Mr. Milkbeard, this happened to me twice over this last summer, but it was the scariest thing that's ever happened to me. Where I live, there is a lot of stories of skinwalkers and things of that nature. But I never really thought they were real, but still kind of freaked me out. There's this place next to a bluff where there are supposedly these skinwalkers and other things of that nature. So late at night, around 1 in the morning actually, we went to this place. It was hard to get to, and it's blocked off by a fence except in one part, which is the only place I know of. As soon as we drove through the fence, I got chills. My buddy was half asleep because it was very late, and he woke up from all the bumps. I heard him gasp and I looked over at him, and he was ghost white and terrified out of his mind. He said, "We need to leave." Now, we left because he was freaking us out. Later he told us he saw a little girl running up the hill, and as soon as we cleared the hill ourselves, no one was there. I wasn't too sure about this because he has just woken up and might have just been flipping out. But one day me and some of the same friends went to that same place, minus my friend that saw the girl. It was just getting dark, so I wasn't as scared. It was a bit of a hike downhill, down some clefts. Me and my friend were ahead of the others, and we both stopped at a growing sound. It sounded like a dog, or coyote, which aren't uncommon here. Either way, we ran back to the top of the hill to our other friends and turned around to look at where we were just standing. We saw a guy just standing where we just were looking at us. We went home. Stupid us went out there later that night with more friends. This time it was only me that got scared shitless. We were just messing around, rock crawling in a lifted truck. I was sticking my head out the window to spot the driver, so he didn't hit any trees or rocks. Then it happens. I hear a little girl screaming the most blood-curdling scream. I flipped out, asked if anyone else heard it. No one else did, so I convinced myself it was just in my head. Until the driver heard it later that night, at the same place. Haven't gone back there, but every time I go I get scared shitless. Anyways, sorry for the long story and probably bad writing. Waishan Station. This might not be as disturbing for other people, but it was extremely disturbing for me. I was really good friends with a guy in high school, and one day I mentioned that I had gotten a boyfriend. This sent him on a tirade about how he was waiting for me and how he's been in love with me and how I was leading him on. It then escalated to him talking about how he had almost killed himself the last time we fought and how he had a knife and was gonna hurt himself. 911 was called, he was sent to a mental hospital for a few days, and he just tried adding me on Facebook. Wook Walrus. I know I'm sorta late, but whatever. Also, this is kinda long. So, me and my friends Mike, Haley, and Lois are all hanging out as we often do on weekends. We're just chilling in 7-Eleven eating our pretzels and drinking our soda we had bought when we got a text from this girl, Melanie. I have the text right in front of me, so this is exact. So me and Jill found this creepy abandoned house and we want to go in. Some convincing of Haley and Lois later. We meet up with Melanie and Jill. A lot of people I know don't bother trying to keep track, only a few end up being important. After some walking about the neighborhood, it's about 11 o'clock and we get to the house. Standard creepy abandoned old house, boards on windows to keep stupid teens like ourselves out. We go into the backyard, gate was open. It's basically a small little rectangle with a pool in the middle with a cover over it. We end up just breaking a lock that was on the back door to get inside the house. The house was kinda just run down and normal at first. Now for the scary things. I'm with Jill, and everyone else is pretty much scattered about the house doing their own exploration. Me and Jill trek up the stairs and go to the first door on the right. Before we even go in, Jill is flipping out. I open the door, and I see a chair in the middle of the room, with nothing but mirrors all around. Glass shards were all around the chair with what I would assume to be blood on them. Jill, for some odd reason, seems to just calm down, and then she wants to go into the attic. So I pull the little string and the staircase into the attic comes down. We both climb up and it's a really tight space. You had to crawl to fit. Jill goes in first, crawling around looking at shit that was left up there like books and whatever. And then we heard a growl. Now everything I'm telling you next happened in the span of about 5 seconds, and I cannot attest to it being real or a sort of manifestation of fear. I looked over, saw a gray-skinned, black-haired girl, yup, exactly like the Grudge, just laying growling. Jill flipped out and fell through the space where the staircase up was. Somehow, her hitting it sent it up, leaving me in the attic. I ripped the Muttley tool from my hoodie pocket and started smashing around the attic staircase in a massive panic. I hear it crawling and dragging even closer. Then finally, I felt something just barely touch me. I smashed down so fucking hard you wouldn't even believe it. Something in the staircase broke, allowing it to come down, so I fell and fractured my wrist. I looked up and it was gone. Also, Jill's a bitch for not fucking opening the staircase. TLDR. Abandoned house, attic, creepy Grudge girl, Jill's a cunt. Choo-choo cannon. After a long day at school, I fell asleep kinda early, fully clothed, with my phone in my hand and on my couch. My lights were out, and it was easy to drift off. At about 1 o'clock, my phone vibrated and rang because I had gotten a text from my sister. I opened my eyes and was about to reach for my phone when I realized there was a man standing in front of me, facing away from me. As my phone vibrated, the man immediately froze and started to slowly turn around. Frightened, I pretended to be asleep, keeping my eyes mostly shut, just barely able to see the man. He turned and faced me, stared at me for a few moments, then started to creep away. He walked out of the back door to my house, shutting it behind him. After a few moments of nearly shitting my pants, I jumped up, locked my back door, and freaked the fuck out. I never thought to call the police. For some reason, it just seemed silly and unbelievable, and so I just sat up all night. Fortunately, I always keep a spare knife hidden in my couch in case I need an impromptu weapon, so I was confident I could defend myself. Looking back, I should have just called the police. TLDR man breaks into my house. I pretend to be asleep. I need a new change of pants.
Crappy mannequin. A few years ago, while visiting my dad all the way up in Minnesota for the summer, I had one of the most terrifying paranormal encounters ever. Keep in mind that the walls are really thin in the house, so I would have known if someone was walking around outside of my bedroom. I also slept by myself in the guest bedroom, and to the right of my bed is an open closet with a mirror facing me, and the door is at the foot of my bed. I remember waking up at 2:54 a.m. I wasn't able to sleep, so I decided to listen to music on my iPod, but the battery was only at 4%, so I, being the lazy shit I am, decided to stay on my bed and suffer in boredom rather than reach over a couple feet to charge my iPod. After I rolled to the other side of the bed and closed my eyes, I heard the doorknob jiggling like someone desperately trying to get in. Immediately, I opened my eyes and saw the doorknob stop jiggling and the door slowly open a few inches. I thought my older brother was trying to scare me, so I closed my eyes again, but I heard footsteps of a heavy person walk by the foot of my bed and stop at the middle of the room. My eyes opened again on instinct, and I looked back at the door and saw that it was only open for that few inches. Then this horrifying feeling of being watched hits my back, and I close my eyes again, slowly covering my head and shoulders with my blanket. After several minutes of being paralyzed in fear, I got the courage to take my head out of the blanket and open my eyes and looked into the mirror in the closet next to my bed. And what I saw scared the living shit out of me. A silhouette of a large man was standing next to my fucking bed. His upper body was crouched as if he was observing me, and his right arm looked like it was reaching out to me. I patted around a half-foot radius in front of my body for my cell phone and accidentally pressed the play button for the music, which played Taylor Swift's Love Story. I was using my sister's memory card, and looked back at the mirror and saw that it was gone. I was scared it'll come back, so I played that song all night until I managed to fall back asleep again. Worst night. My life. Dar, Taylor Swift makes the ghost go away. Wales. Kinda late on this thread, but whatever, sue me. When I was young, 9 or 10, we owned this old wooden mini fridge, usually stocked with beers and soda pop, that kind of stuff. Anyways, one night I went to grab a drink out of the fridge. As I approach it, I can hear beer bottles clanking softly. I thought that was odd, but it didn't think much of it. Then I took one more step forward and the whole fucking fridge started shaking. Like visibly and audibly shaking. Then I decided I wasn't all that thirsty and ran the fuck away. Looking back, it was probably an earthquake tremor, and not a demonic hellbeast waiting for me to open the fridge of the underworld so he can ejaculate fire onto the earth from his cock of sorrow. But 10-year-old me would not take any chances. Trust your gut, kids. I was young and I'd like to say that it was just a kid's mistake, but I could just be stupid though. I got a new bike and was excited to ride it, but I wasn't allowed to go off my street. So of course I did as soon as my parents' backs were turned. I was old enough to know that what I was doing was wrong, but I didn't really care. So I'm in a nearby neighborhood, minding my own business when a guy rolls up in a van and asks if I need a ride. I say no, but he continues to ask questions. The entire exchange feels off, so I quickly turn around and race home. Halfway down the street, I realize the guy is actually banging a U-turn and coming around. Oh hell no. I race across a busy street, nearly getting hit, and instead of going the extra bit to my neighborhood, I just speed down the street behind my own street and go to my neighbor's house, who lives behind me, and ditch my bike. They have a huge yard and I can easily climb their small fence and reach over the top of my own larger fence and drop into my backyard. I quickly do so, and once inside the safety of my backyard, I look out one of the holes in the wood fence and I see the van drive by slowly on my neighbor's street. The man obviously sees my bike in the yard and thinks that it must be my house as he waits for a bit before quickly driving away. Once he was gone, I started crying, but I was too scared to go get my bike back or even go biking again after my neighbor kindly brought it back to me. I didn't even tell my parents because I was sure I'd get in trouble for going off the street. It seems stupid of me not to tell them now, but meh, kid logic. Reddit, what is your most disturbing, scary, or creepy real story? Serious Part 8. Deleted user. When I was about 13, my grandparents owned a house on the waterfront. The property was on a heavily wooded peninsula, and because my grandparents lived in Florida half of the year, they allowed their, obviously grown children to use the house as a sort of vacation home. The woods were littered with sizable streams that emptied out into the larger body of water that the house faced, and some of these streams were deep enough in places so as to provide swimming holes, relatively deep pockets of slow-moving water that were often close to the stream bank. One of my favorite such holes was about 12-15 feet deep and had fairly cloudy visibility if you went any deeper than 3 feet under the surface. These measurements are probably off. It was at least a decade ago that this happened, and everything seems bigger when you are a child. And when you're terrified, being a kid, I didn't think of the stupidity of swimming in such a spot. It was made even more awesome by a long rope somebody had tied around a thick tree limb. You would swing on the rope, and once you got high enough, you'd let go and drop down into the water below. Once, when my parents were taking a nap, I got it into my head that it would be a great time to go swimming, alone, without supervision. When I arrived at the hole, I decided to challenge myself and see if I could reach the bottom. I pulled the rope back as far away from the edge of the water as I could until I was standing on my tiptoes. Holding the rope, I ran full speed until I was airborne, then dropped into the water. Unbelievably, and I use that term loosely, I sank to the bottom. Satisfied with this result, I pushed off the stream bed, expecting to be propelled back to the top. Instead, I went a few inches and was abruptly jerked back. Confused, I tried again, and again I went nowhere. Panicking, I realized that my swimming trunks had gotten snagged on a submerged stump or log, but in my mind, some evil creature had grabbed hold of me. I desperately struggled to get free. This is the part that I remember most. My vision started to darken around the periphery. Tunnel vision, if you will. Bright spots of lights were flashing in the little window of sight I still had. The pain in my oxygen-deprived lungs, it felt like they were on fire. I could actually feel myself starting to pass out. Losing muscle control, my eyes starting to roll back in my head. My limbs felt so heavy and I was losing the will to struggle. Then it happened. Somebody appeared through the murky water and freed my shorts from the stump. They grabbed a hold of me and carried me up to surface. Then they were gone. There was no trace of them. A huge tear in one of the legs of my bathing suit was the only physical evidence of my ordeal. Thinking back, I'm fairly certain that this savior entity was a product of my oxygen-deprived brain. What I believe actually happened was a result of an intense effort of my mind telling me save itself. Some part of me must have had the wherewithal to make a final, desperate struggle that luckily ripped my shorts and freed me. That same part of me must have made some sort of effort to swim to the surface as well, though I suppose it's possible that my body's natural buoyancy had something to do with that.
Shark Bit 3. I was in middle school, perhaps 7th or 8th grade, at the time. My brother, who is 2 years younger than I, were home alone with 2 of our friends of the same age. Our parents were out for the majority of the night at some dinner party, maybe 10 or 15 minutes away. Anyway, we were all in the basement playing video games, when I went upstairs with our dog to let her out to go to the bathroom. Our front doors are double doors. The one opens, while the second stays shut, unless you bend over and unhinge it at the bottom, and get on your tiptoes and do the same up top. We always keep it locked. So I let my dog, Nugget, out, shut the door and lock it. I'm 150% sure it was locked. I hadn't stayed home alone too many times before this, but my parents made sure to stress that I always kept the doors locked. So after locking the door, I head downstairs and continue to play video games with everyone else. About 20 minutes later, my friend Spencer says, "Hey, who let Nugget in?" It hits me that she is laying down about 5 feet from us all. We all look at each other with blank stares. I head upstairs, thinking my parents may be home. Calling out to them yields no response. Both of the double front doors are wide open. I run over, shut them, lock them, then check the garage. The car is still gone. I call my parents, and sure enough, they're still at the party. I explain what happened and they tell me they're coming home immediately. I grab a knife, run downstairs, and we all go and hide in the storage room until my parents come home. Scariest shit ever, and to this day I don't know what happened. TLDR home alone. Let my dog out, locked the doors. She gets back in the house and I find the door wide open. Obsidian stone. This experience I'm going to share scared the shit out of me. It happened almost 8 years ago when I was 20, and sometimes I still wondered just what the hell was going on. My best friend and I were both in a bind and looking for a place to move into ASAP. We found this basement apartment close to downtown. It was a total shithole, but it was a 2-bedroom for $650, which made it worth it for a bit while we found a better place. A few days after moving in, I started having really bad nightmares and waking up terrified but couldn't remember what I dreamt. After about a week of this, every time I was in my room I felt like someone was going to bust through my wall and kill me. The landlord had a storage he could access on the other side of my bedroom wall. Since my room was bigger and my friend's room was more like a closet, she moved into my room with me. I started noticing when I went into the backyard at night to let the dog go for a quick piss, it always looked like someone on the top floor of the house was watching me. My roommate noticed this too when she came out with me. Now me and my friend also had a mutual guy friend that we had met through. The 3 of us were always hanging out and he stayed over frequently. One night we were all out and after he decided to go home. My roommate and I stayed up a few hours till about 3-ish. Realizing we were likely to sleep in, we went to bring the dog out before going to bed. I had my dog on her leash so she wouldn't give me any monkey business when I wanted her to come in. Standing by the door, I started to see shadows that looked like people walking towards me and my roomie. I don't know what came over me, but I screamed, "Get in the house." My roommate was like, "WTF?" or something like that, but me, her and the dog booked it into the house. When we got to the bottom of the stairs, we both saw these red eyes peering into the shitty little windows we had. I screamed my face off, yelling out for our friend that went home earlier. My roommate's cell rings and it was our buddy, not sure why but had a feeling he should call. We had him book his ass over to our house. He stayed over almost every night for 2 weeks until we moved the hell out of there. I don't know why, but me and my roommate always felt like the landlord, upstairs resident, had something to do with our uneasy feelings. Make what you will of this, but it scared the ever-living crap out of me. 8 years later, and I still get the heebie-jeebies when I happen to pass that house on the streetcar. I am a trainer. When my twin brother and I were still kids, we used to sleep late during summer vacation. One time, our dad went out, and has not gone home. He normally knocks with a distinct rhythm, to let us know that he needs to come in, whenever he forgets his keys. We heard the same knock at around 11 p.m., and rushed to open the door, thinking that it was Dad. We asked who was knocking, to be safe. We did not hear any response, so my brother and I just shrugged it off, thinking that we were hearing things. Just as we turned around, we heard the rhythmic knock again. We asked who was knocking, but still got no response. We ran upstairs, a bit scared, but thinking that maybe it was Dad's idea of a joke. Then we heard a sound, very similar to the doorknob turning and our door opening. But the door was closed. We ran up again, and heard heavier footsteps running after us. No one was behind us, so we ran toward our bedroom and tried to slam the door shut. We heard a loud thud, instead, like we hit someone or something. The door also flew back as if we did hit something running towards it. We dove under the covers and started shouting our lungs off until, you guessed it, Mom and Dad came to check what was happening. Turns out Dad did not leave the house at all during that night. Nipples for hire. I was with a friend of mine during high school, so this is about 3 years ago. I was visiting a friend of mine in Korea for the summer and we had stayed out for the night because it was a Friday. We were sitting on this park bench and we see this kid walk by with a box of fried chicken. He sat down a few benches away and we ignored him until we started to leave. As we started to leave the small park, we saw him drop an unfinished piece of fried chicken, and then start to walk our way. We brushed it off because maybe he had to go in this direction and maybe he was just really lazy and didn't want to throw his food away. With that, we started walking away. We crossed a road and as we did so, we saw that he was on the other side. We would have ignored it again, had he not given a smile and a wave. I asked my friend if she knew him, but she also seemed confused. We then just assumed that he was a creepy kid or some kind of stalker. We gave a little awkward wave back before turning around and walking at a faster pace. We went a few blocks before going into a coffee house. We were still a bit wary about the child, but we doubted that he would follow us this far. We were wrong. We watched him through the window as he turned a small corner and then followed the street towards us. My friend scares easily, so she told me she wanted to go to the bathroom. So we did. To explain the Korean bathroom situation, most public food areas or cafes are attached to larger buildings, and to get to the bathroom, you have to leave the cafe through a door within the cafe and then go into the hallway. While I calmed my friend down in the bathroom, it happened. The lights turned out. The door was kicked open, and then we were pushed into a stall. Hands groped my hair, and another covered my mouth. It didn't matter. I was far too terrified to scream. I felt something cold against my throat. I could hear my friend's gasps of pain and I thought that I was going to be killed or raped by this psycho kid. But then he stopped. He whispered, "Wrong one," before running out of the bathroom. We were left there in the dark, unable to grasp what had just happened to us, and even now I am haunted by nightmares of what that boy could have possibly meant, or possibly have been trying to do. Reddit: what is your most disturbing, scary or creepy real story series? Adam Gent. Not so much as scary, but creepy as shit. Around 2007, my son and I were walking about through the woods. He was about 5 at the time. While we were walking, he told me he wanted to show me something. Amusing him, I just told him to show me and he started to lead me down this trail. I had been in these woods many of times, but never went down this trail because I remembered it being a dead end. Well, after following him down this trail, it led to a dilapidated house, shack. Keep in mind, my son is 5 and definitely hasn't been down in these woods before. I asked him how he knew how there was a house here, and he said it was where him and his buddy Tom, imaginary friend, come and hang out when Tom can't sleep. I was gonna go inside, but my son told me not to worry about trying, that Tom blocks the door with things so nobody can steal his stuff. I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't open but like an inch because something was in the way. I still think about it and have asked him about Tom's house, but he claims he got sick and had to leave. I'd go back, but now the woods have been clear cut for Kroger. Plain_dude. When I was about 12, I stayed up late watching an old X-File episode, the one where the guy has cockroaches crawling under his skin. Anyway, I went to bed during a bit of a storm at around midnight. I began to have these intense alien abduction dreams. At one point I'm on an abduction table with the grey things looking over me with intense white light. Then out of nowhere I woke up in my bed to a huge bang and intense light still filtering down throughout the house. The light was more intense outside, so I walked out to the balcony. We live in a 2-story house, and walked outside to see that my neighbor's paperbark tree had been split down the middle of it with what I presume was lighting. There were glowing embers of paper bark floating everywhere. TLDR, aliens might have transported me back to Earth via a lighting strike after abduction. Cheeky buffalo. When I was 10 years old, my friend was spending the night in my room. We had 2 radios playing at either end of my room, our early version of surround sound. IDK, we were young. We went downstairs, my room is a loft, to go brush our teeth. When we came back upstairs, both of the radios were just playing static. I walked to the radio closest to the door and the static was suddenly interrupted by a deep voice that growled, "Don't you dare touch that dial." After this complete static, for the rest of the night, we ended up sleeping downstairs. Armandar. When we were seniors in high school, my idiot friends used to like to follow people in our cars. We were at a local supermarket and chose to follow this one car. We followed it all the way to the next town over, through random back streets, and he finally loses us. We start creeping down this one street and a 20-ish-year-old man starts walking from the driveway with a shotgun pointed at our car. Moral of the story: don't be a teenage idiot. Deleted user. My junior year of college I moved into a large house with 4 people on the first floor, 5 on the second, and 2 people upstairs who we didn't really talk to. The house was very old but seemed normal enough, until I went down to the basement for the first time. There was a washing machine and dryer that never worked, so we had no real reason to ever go down there except for parties. The weird part was this room towards the back of the basement that was always locked, and just gave me an overwhelming sense of fear anytime I was down there. Well, apparently when my roommates first moved in, that room wasn't locked. One of the girls was looking around and found several human teeth and what she described as strange tools. Not long after that, the landlord, who had only recently purchased the house, locked the door and it was never opened again. Fast forward a few months. I had recently woken up from a nap and was cooking some food on the stove, and I was the only person on our floor. Suddenly the hallway light to my left turns off and I just shrugged it off, assuming the light had burnt out. Then it turned back on. The light switch for that light is in the stairwell on the other side of a closed door, so I waited a minute and the light turned off again. I quickly ran over to the door and opened it, thinking someone had to be fucking with me or something. No one there. I walked downstairs and there was nobody on that floor either. Now I'm a little freaked out but still just tell myself it must be an electrical problem. So I go back to my food. Immediately the light goes on and off again. I just kinda stood there for a few seconds. Then the music started. It was coming from the living room, which is right next to the kitchen. Now I'm feeling relieved, thinking that someone is home after all. Walk into the living room. There is a closed laptop sitting on a ledge near the window connected to some speakers, and the television was on one of those static channels just like in the fucking movies. I slowly walked towards the speakers when I realized the laptop wasn't even fucking on. I unplugged the speakers and the music stopped. I really wish I could remember what song it was, but I had other thoughts on my mind at that point. That was when the chill sunk in. I turned off the stove, walked down the stairs, got in my car, and drove the fuck away. A few weeks later I told my roommates what had happened, hoping that someone would confess to the very elaborate prank they had pulled. Instead, everyone got kinda quiet, and one by one they each started admitting weird shit that had happened to them. One of the girls said she would often wake up in the middle of the night and she would often hear noises coming from her closet, and sometimes the hangers would be moving like something had just bumped them. Another friend said that he often heard noises, like footsteps above him, but when he walked upstairs nobody was home. Another guy told us he had woken up in the middle of the night to see a dark figure standing in the middle of our kitchen just staring into his room before it walked back towards the stairwell. Pooch 217. A little late to the thread, so this might not get many reads, but I'll post it anyways. So when I was 7 or 8 I went over to a friend's house after school. My friend's house was located on a relatively quiet street and had a large backyard surrounded by woods. My friend and I decided it'd be a good day to build a tree fort we'd in the woods behind his house. We rounded up the necessary tools and brought his little brother to tag along. Some background to the story: there had recently been some daytime coyote spotting in the area, so we were nervous to begin with. I can remember discussing, with my friend and his younger brother, our plan to smash any attacking coyotes with a hammer. In retrospect, probably would not have worked at all, but like I said, we were little kids. As we were walking along the path out into the woods, I can vividly remember looking down at the trail while walking and conversing with my friend when all of a sudden my friend's younger brother stopped dead in his tracks and remained there motionless. Before I really knew what was going on, my friend also stopped suddenly, so naturally I did the same and looked up to see what was frightening them. I can still, very clearly, remember the image. There was an older woman, I'd guess mid-late 70s if I had to say an age, with waving curly grayish-white hair, dressed in a white gown roughly 25 yards ahead of us in the woods. She wasn't moving, she was just standing there, completely motionless, not looking at us, but rather through us, if that makes sense. I get chills just thinking of it now, but the image is still so clear in my mind. What I'm about to say next seems like a bit of a stretch, and it was more than likely my imagination getting the better of me. However, there was a faint aura of white-like around the women. My friends and I have since discussed the incident, and they too described the light. After standing paralyzed for what seemed like several moments, we watched as the women slowly raised her right arm and pointed in the direction from which we'd come. Almost immediately, and like a scene from a movie, we all screamed, dropping our tools, nails, and pieces of wood for the treehouse as we sprinted back towards my friend's house. We frantically told my friend's mom what we'd seen, and to no one's surprise, she dismissed it as childhood imagination. We're now all over 20 years old, and we are still in agreement that we saw a glowing, white-haired woman dressed in a white gown in the middle of the woods who pointed at us. Slater. My cousin, Jay, and his wife, A, had a bad stretch in their lives and had to move in with some relatives. Her uncles flipped houses professionally and had recently purchased some cheap property in an old suburb of Toronto. This one gives me chills because they are very reasonable, not superstitious people. I didn't believe it at first, but my cousin is a big strong guy, heavy engine mechanic, and he seemed terrified after he told me this, so I don't know what to believe. It was a rundown piece of shit, but it had an extra bedroom and heating. So J and A moved in and lived on the ground floor with their 2 cats. Things were pretty normal for 4 months, until the uncles decided to rescue 2 more cats, bringing the total to 4. It was light at first, they'd hear weird noises at night sometimes and things would go missing, jewelry and the like, but they would pop up. Jay is kinda absent-minded, so it's not unlike him to move shit and forget about it. However, things started to escalate in the weird department shortly after the 2 new cats were brought in. The cats would gather in a semicircle and hiss at the door to the basement. One time they started yowling so loud it woke people up, but they all scattered with J and A went to check it out. The cats would do this at night regularly after a while, hissing, yowling at the basement door late at night. They thought maybe rats were in basement, so the uncles called in an exterminator and they laid down poison traps. After the exterminator finished his work, he made a comment about keeping the cats out of the basement, but all 4 of them realized that despite the door being open, sometimes they never recalled seeing the cats cross the basement threshold, let alone in the basement itself. Shortly after this, maybe after 6 months of living in the house, J and A had one final incident that made them move out of the house. A was downstairs doing the dishes and J upstairs, helping the uncles install some new shelves. She heard J walk, then break onto a full run down the stairs toward the basement door. He then slammed the door behind him with such force that the noise made her drop a dish and break it. A yelled at J for being a lumbering buffoon and scaring her. Then about 20 seconds later, J came down to the same set of stairs and asked if A had fell down or something, because her and the uncles heard all the commotion downstairs. When A realized that J was upstairs the whole time, her blood ran ice cold. She then proceeded to tell J that someone had ran down the stairs and slammed the door shut. The uncles and Jay went to check out the basement and found no one was there. Anyway, they moved out maybe a week or two later. The uncles didn't last much longer. They sold the property to a development. But now there's a Tim Horton, Wendy's, Subway built on the old site. A few years later, A was telling one of her co-workers at a new job about what happened. The girl she told asked where about the house was located. Apparently the girl grew up in that suburb, and the house was famous. An old woman had lived there alone with her cats for years. They found her dead one day in the basement. She had killed herself and the cats had eaten parts of her. The kids used to dare each other to sneak peek into the basement window.
Inheriting a seemingly haunted house from an uncle he barely knew, a man moves in to facilitate its sale, leaving behind his wife and twin daughters. Alone, he encounters unsettling phenomena: misplaced items, unexplained shadows, and time slips. The appearance of a dog named Buster, left by a neighbor who believes his uncle passed only recently, provides temporary solace until Buster vanishes under mysterious circumstances, only to reappear inexplicably. The man's work success contrasts sharply with the eerie happenings at the house, including a disturbing discovery in a bathroom and sinister messages appearing on the walls. His attempts to escape the house's grasp fail, leading to increasingly horrifying experiences that blur the lines between reality and madness. Calls to police and attempts to connect with the outside world offer no relief, as the house seems to manipulate reality itself. Desperation grows as he questions his own sanity and existence, unable to remember key details of his life outside the house. The story culminates in a chilling realization of his entrapment within a cycle of psychological torment, with the house, or something within it, driving him to the brink of madness. His attempts to document the horror, to reach out through digital pleas for help, become increasingly disjointed. Words twist into grim farewells on their own, as if the house itself is hijacking his intent, crafting its own narrative of despair. The more he writes, the more he feels the pull of an abyss, the loss of every personal detail he once held dear. His identity dissolves into the miasma of the haunted domicile, leaving behind a shell ensnared by the macabre dance of ghostly machinations. The concept of escape becomes a cruel joke. Each plan to flee or outwit the house's influences ends in failure, looping back to the start like a twisted Groundhog Day with a sinister edge. The reality he occupies bends and folds, trapping him in a labyrinth with no exit, where even time and space mock his plight. As the man confronts this endless cycle, a realization dawns upon him with the weight of 1,000 nightmares. The house doesn't just haunt, it consumes. It feeds on fear, confusion, and sanity, twisting memories and reality until nothing remains but the echo of a life that once was. His final entries are not messages of hope or plans for escape, but acknowledgments of defeat, a surrender to the void that has replaced his existence. Yet in the heart of despair, a sliver of defiance glimmers. With nothing left to lose, he decides to confront the core of the haunting. The house might control the narrative, but he will not go quietly into the night. His last act will not be one of surrender, but a challenge thrown in the face of whatever malevolence holds him captive. Armed with nothing but a fading sense of self, he ventures into the darkest corners of the house, each step a battle against the overwhelming urge to give in to madness. He calls out to the shadows, to the memories of his family he can barely grasp, using their fading images as a shield against the darkness. What follows is a journey through a psychological hell, a confrontation with manifestations of his deepest fears and regrets. The house throws everything at him, warping reality to break his spirit. But in this final stand, something remarkable happens. The very act of defiance, however futile it might seem, ignites a spark of clarity. He may not remember his name, his past, or the faces of those he loved, but he clings to the essence of who he is. In this moment, he is more than a victim or a plaything for spectral forces. He is a beacon of human will in the face of the incomprehensible. Amid the swirling chaos of his final defiance, a flicker of insight pierces the gloom. The man realizes the haunting is not just an external force, but a mirror of his own psyche, a manifestation of buried traumas, guilt, and fears. The house, with its shifting corridors and endless tricks, is a labyrinth of his making, a physical embodiment of his struggle to confront and accept the darker aspects of himself. With this revelation comes a shift in perspective. The monsters and shadows that plagued him transform, not into benign figures, but into symbols of his own inner turmoil. The messages on the walls, the disappearing and reappearing dog, even the sinister phone calls, they all represent fragments of his fractured identity, begging to be acknowledged and understood. He stops running. Instead of seeking a way out, he seeks a way through. He walks the house not as a prisoner but as a pilgrim, each room a station in a journey of self-discovery. The once terrifying spaces become scenes of introspection where memories long suppressed bubble to the surface, demanding attention. As he confronts these revelations, the nature of the house's torment shifts. It no longer seeks to scare him with grotesqueries but challenges him with truths. He sees not just the fears he's run from but the hopes and dreams he's abandoned along the way. He finds rooms he never entered, filled with light and echoes of laughter, as if the house itself is revealing a path to reconciliation with his past. In this journey, time loses its meaning. Hours, days, perhaps weeks pass as he wanders the endless halls, each step forward a piece of the puzzle slotting into place. The narrative of horror that once dominated begins to fray, giving way to a story of healing and forgiveness. But such journeys are neither easy nor without cost. The deeper he delves into the heart of his own darkness, the more he risks losing himself completely. The temptation to succumb, to let the house take everything and end the pain, grows with every revelation. Yet it's the memory of Buster, the loyal dog that represented unconditional love and protection, that keeps him anchored. It's a reminder of what's at stake, not just his sanity, but the chance for redemption and renewal. The climax comes not with a battle against a ghost or demon, but with an acceptance of self. Standing in the very room where the horrors began, he speaks aloud the truths he's uncovered, each word a renunciation of fear and a step towards liberation. As he does, the house, his house, responds. Walls that once seemed to close in on him recede. Shadows that lurked in corners dissipate. The air, heavy with the scent of decay, clears. He's left standing in an ordinary room, the sun streaming through windows that were once shrouded in darkness. There's no dramatic vanquishing of spirits, no house crumbling to the ground in defeat. There's just a man, breathless and weary, but whole in a way he hasn't been for a long time. The story ends as he steps outside, not into a world forever altered by his ordeal, but into a day bright with possibility. He's not the same man who entered the house, nor is the house the same. It stands not as a monument to fear, but as a testament to the journey through it. And so our tale concludes not with a goodbye, but with a sense of beginning. The man, whose name we never quite grasp, walks away from the house not because he's escaping, but because he's ready to live again, carrying with him the lessons learned from the deepest darkness. In the end, the story is not about a haunted house, but about haunting oneself, about the ghosts we all carry and the power we have to face them. It's a reminder that sometimes the scariest stories are the ones we tell about ourselves, and the most powerful ones are those of our own making.
Al Bundy 758. I stole over $20,000 in a very creative way in the 90s. No regrets. I worked at a fast food chain in the 90s when I was in high school. When I worked there, they were in the process of phasing out denominational gift certificates. $5, $10 and $25. The way it worked was if you spent more than half of the certificate, they gave you the cash back. So if you ordered $5.50 worth of food and gave them one of the $10 gift cards, they gave you the $4.50 back in cash. My manager was in charge of destroying all the existing certificates as we transitioned to the more traditional credit card-looking gift cards. So my manager said he shredded the certificates like he was supposed to, but one night when I was closing, I found 2 boxes of the gift cards tucked deep in the dry storage room. They were filled with the certificates that were supposed to be shredded. So, I scooped them up, brought them out to the dumpster in trash bags and threw them away. After we closed, I came back and recovered the back, and brought the certificates home. I counted them. There were $1,025, $1,010, and $505 certificates. None of them had expiration dates. Total haul was $40,000 in fast food certificates. My manager never said a word, he couldn't. He had reported them destroyed weeks earlier. Over the next 3 years, my girlfriend and I toured every location in our state, and the next 4 states, ordering food, and getting the change. We never kept track on a spreadsheet or anything, but we got good at knowing what menu items were just about half. After the first year, we started saving the change in a shoebox, and let it build up. I bought my first car for $7,800 cash from the change. And for some reason a kitty cone was $1.05, if you gave them a $5 cert they gave you $3.95 back. We threw away a lot of kitty cones. Edit. Holy crap, this blew up. Here are the answers to some of the FAQs. We could hit 10 to 12 stores in a day if we drove around for 5 to 6 hours. Both of us would use a gift cert. It was not that labor intensive. The only cameras in the store were at the cash registers and takeout window. The manager has no clue who took them, or at least never treated me differently. Each gift certificate had a generic PLU on them. EI. All the $25 were PLU number 756. When we stopped selling the certificates we were told to keep honoring them because they were prepaid. They were not coupons. One can only eat so many ice cream cones. And now for the reactions, smiley face. Solstice cleaner. I worked at a stupidly named chain music store in the mall back in the early 2000s and my manager got busted doing this very same thing after she got promoted to district manager. We were phasing out our gift coins in favor of gift cards at the point and she ganked a bunch of the coins. Her flaw. She only ran this scam on stores within the district she managed, where the staff knew her and got a little suspicious. F. Similarly, a friend and I bought a roll of Subway, Sub Club coupons from eBay in the early 2000s. I ate Subway for free for around 2 years until they cancelled the program, smiley face. Nick_Jones. If you think that's bad, try getting apple pies consistently. I live less than 1.5 miles from 4 different McDonald's and I've been trying to get one for a week. It's not a machine issue either, it's just blatant laziness. Sin for Jesus. Having worked at McDonald's for 2 years I can confirm that both your lack of ice cream and apple pies is bullshit. The manager doesn't want to have to record a high amount of food waste so they don't make any apple pies, and they don't want high drive-through times so they just tell you the ice cream machine is down. Marcusa's 33. I just did some quick math, but to get $7,800 in change, say from $25 certs. Wouldn't you need to visit a restaurant about 680 times, say if you spent just over half of $25, seems a bit time-consuming? Napping 1. Well, he said his girlfriend was also doing it, so I guess they could do 2 per store. So that's 340 trips, which seems more reasonable over 3 years. Also, gas was dirt cheap back then, so if they really wanted to they could cover a lot of ground over a weekend and still have it be worth it. Samshin. Man, I hope to one day be able to look at a chance at making hundreds of dollars in a day and say, man, that seems way too time-consuming. If I could go by every McDonald's in my city today to make $300, I'd be out the door right now. That's food for my family for weeks. Deleted user. 6Y ago. My fast food scam was coupons. Worked at a pizza place as a delivery driver and they were very relaxed about the coupons. So when a customer gave me a BOGO large coupon I'd hang on to it until I got an order for 2 large pizzas without a coupon. When I got back I'd hand the receipt and coupon to my manager and tell them they gave it to me when I got there, so I only charged them for 1 pizza. She would adjust the bill and I'd pocket $15. 5 or 6 of those a night, working 5 nights a week for 3 years, $58K. Coming up waters. I call BS. To get the $7.8 thousand using the highest increment, $12, would take 650 trips. That's every other day for 3 years. Even if you could go that often, it's amazingly obvious what's happening when the same person comes in with the same discontinued coupons that earn a cash credit. No manager is gonna let that happen. Edit. OP's response seems reasonable, but changes it from a quick easy scheme to one that pays out $20 an hour at most, ignoring gas. Whiskey on a Sunday 93. There's probably 7 McDonald's in my town within a 45-minute drive. Make the rounds one day, 3 days later send your GF, 3 days later go again yourself. That's basically hitting 1 restaurant once a week per person and getting 14 total McDonald's trips done. Seems perfectly feasible for a few months at least. Luckaneni. They probably have hundreds, if not thousands, of customers a day, and if you've ever worked at a place like this, you know that all the faces start to blend together and, besides, people working minimum wage don't really care, they just want their paycheck. Probably use the drive though as well, making them even less memorable. Heckle Puff. The other thing I'm not following is that Ops said they only cashed out gift certificates that had less than $5 remaining on them. So, all the certificates he found in the boxes should have only had less than $5 left on them, right? There would not have been any $25/$10 gift certificates like he said, or did I read it incorrectly and misunderstood it? Zelexipa. I did something similar, but not to that extent. At my old fast food job, we used to have an option to discount orders for senior citizens or provide a manual discount of up to 15 to 20%. I only did this when I needed some small pocket cash. I'd find someone who had an order of about $20 or so and was paying cash. Ring up their total. If I saw them paying cash, I'd hit the discount on the screen, and keep notes of how much the register would be over. I mostly only took like $5 to $10 at a time and not every day. Op has got some balls for doing that though, hats off to you, huh? Falcon 4287. It's a theft of opportunity, and pulled off creatively. Still theft, though. Can't say I haven't done similar, but I don't look back on those things and try to morally justify them. I was upset at my managers and took it out on the business as a way to stick it to the man. I felt like I was smarter than my bosses and wanted to prove it to myself. Turns out that who was smarter was not important, but that I was willing to do things more underhanded than they were. And that's not a competition I felt good about winning in the end. However, acknowledging that I have a mind geared towards that type of thinking has helped me significantly in the field of cybersecurity. Now I can catch people like that. And I get to prove that I'm both more underhanded and smarter than those people. Hatico_CR. That's a very unethical way to bend the rules to your benefit. Gladly you did that on the 90s. Should someone try to do something like Thay today, he could be easily identified using surveillance cameras, especially as an employee of the same company. Chadwick 619. It's a little strange to me that nobody has a problem with someone telling us all that he stole a bunch of money. It's corporate money. Okay, cool. I mean, I know a lot of people think stealing from people or entities is somehow different or less morally reprehensible if said people or entities have lots of money, or things. I get it. Maybe the manager was going to do it anyway. Yeah, okay, maybe. Still stealing. It happened a long time ago, nobody got hurt, who cares? I genuinely mean that. Still, I am nonetheless a little surprised at all the positivity being rained upon someone telling a story about how they once stole more money than a lot of people will ever have at once. Schmalz__Flegion. My girlfriend's dad had this dream of running grocery store. It required that the employees could be trusted. He went BK because one checker worked a failing in the books. It ruined her family's life. Good job OP, you are a certified grifter. 3N07S. Company I work for has these paper certificates as well. Can redeem them for food but no cash value, so you can't actually get money back. But you get free food by using them to pay for your food. Anything left over just doesn't get used up and the certificate should be shredded by the manager. 0000000. I'm drunk. But coming from a former GM of a poorly run, food-serving franchise. None of this makes sense. He keeps mixing up the terms cards and certificates, which would be rung up very differently. Certificates are treated as cash, and turned in with daily business reports. Gift cards are treated as limited credit cards. They can't just be used again, they have to be recharged from Ring UPS via card or cash. When they're out, they're out. I've worked with plenty of people that thought they were sly sneaking less than $10,000 off poorly ran, high-traffic businesses. Seen more than not arrested, none walking away with more than $4,000, and that was over the course of 6 years. Asserting you took and spent $40,000 like it was nothing is ludicrous. Deleted user. It seems odd to me that the store didn't have any way of verifying the gift certificates were being destroyed. I mean, this probably happened in other towns. They must have been able to see that way more certificates were being used than had ever been made. Maybe that was why they stopped them in the first place. My manager never said a word, he couldn't. He had reported them destroyed weeks earlier. Still. You are lucky you didn't get robbed at gunpoint. If the manager suspected you had the vouchers, you may be missing a few teeth. For example, stealing drug money from someone doesn't mean, oh well, they can't ring the cops, he'll get away with it. it's more likely it means you will get a knife to your throat and beaten within an inch of your life. Laszlo Rave. My second day as management, someone paid for a new set of rims and tires with $5 gift cards, cost was something like $1,050, est. Apparently his work was supposed to have $1,000 gift card giveaway from my store, but they misunderstood and bought $205 gift cards. System could only do 10 gift cards per transaction. I swiped 200 gift cards that day across 21 separate transactions, which had to make sense on paper, and the back office work for 21 transactions, 21st being the remaining balance owed, was more of a nightmare making the system understand. Log work for transactions was a nightmare because the system needed to charge to reduce balance of the gift card via a charge, and I used labor charge and manually entered $50, 10 cards equals $50. This triggered the technician's labor commission every transaction, which gave him an invalid payout and didn't give the original sales representative sales commission, which was something like 0.036 of every dollar if I remember. Sales rep should have made over $36 for that single sale, but the system gave an error on manual overrides for sales commission, so that needed to be fixed. It was just a nightmare of red tape. I still get triggered by gift cards. My second day as management and I wanted to shoot myself. Mech 8. Something similar happened in a supermarket I worked in, except it was an envelope full of credit card receipts with card number, expiry date etc., and it was very well hidden under our waste compactor. I brought them to the office, but on second thought, I should have burned them myself. The scam effort probably originated in the office. Super snaz. I knew of a guy who stole working in a bottle liquor store. Beer came in 6 packs or a slab of 24. A slab of 24 cost about as much as 3 6-packs. He would buy a slab from his own money and leave it, then pocket the cash from the next 4 6-pack sales. Repeat throughout the shift. Every 4 6-pack sales earned him the price of a 6-pack. Inventory and cash register always balanced perfectly. Last exit 25. I worked at McDonald's in high school, and in my town after 3 p.m. all the adults went home and only high school students worked for the rest of the night. The manager system worked like this: if you were a senior in high school then you were a manager, and once they graduated the next person in line was up. It was a total shit show and one of the best ways to ease my way into the work world. When the Monopoly game came around, we used to order tons of extra sleeves of hash brown holders which came with the 2 pull-off pieces. I used to take boxes of them home, there is like 200 per box, and my friends and I would peel for hours and set aside the free food and the instant money winners. I cashed in all the money winners at other stores, and my friends never paid for food for a long while. Al Bundy 758. Op. Holy crap, this blew up. Here are the answers to some of the FAQs. We could hit 10 to 12 stores in a day if we drove around for 5 to 6 hours. Both of us would use a gift cert. It was not that labor intensive. The only cameras in the store were at the cash registers and takeout window. The manager has no clue who took them, or at least never treated me differently. Each gift certificate had a generic PLU on them. EI. All the $25 were PLU number 756. When we stopped selling the certificates we were told to keep honoring them because they were prepaid. They were not coupons. One can only eat so many ice cream cones. Kberk 106. My brother was quitting his job at Walgreens and the manager was throwing away massive full-ink cartridges for their big printers. He told my brother to throw them out, so instead he just took them home. He looked them up and overall they're worth about $2,000. Mistakes like this are the best, haha. Odemandre. A friend of mine's older brother found an offer in a mailer that was good for $25 gift certificate at a chain restaurant that would return the unused value in cash. He'd have a drink at the bar and use one, then leave a nice tip, have a seat at a table, eat an app and use another. He went to all the local apartment places and opened the stacks of mailers or looked through the recycling in the mail room for residents and collected hundreds of these to redeem. Absolute spaz. I did something pretty similar. I stole a book of 10-pound vouchers from somewhere in the early 90s. One of the shops you could redeem them was called Superdrug. I went in the first time and bought a chomp bar. They cost 10p at the time, thinking I'd just get the £9.90 back in change, but the girl behind the counter pulled out a book of £1 vouchers and gave me 9 of those and 90p. The next few days was spent just rinsing and repeating the scam. Eventually they caught on and I got banned. Still made a good few quid though, for a youngster. Isometal. How much did you have to spend in gas driving to other states in order to do this though? Fried_thol humori. In the 90s has was most likely under $1. So it wouldn't have been that bad to fill the tank. Also depending on where in the country he lives, he could be close to a bunch of states. From where I am in Pennsylvania right now it's 8 miles to New Jersey, 47 to Delaware, 55 miles to New York, and 59 to Maryland. All reachable in an hour with a heavy foot. If I was willing to drive for 3 hours, I can add Virginia, West Virginia, Connecticut, and just fall shy of Rhode Island. Otter, 99. A similar thing happened in a restaurant I worked at. We had $5 off coupon cards and when somebody turned one in we placed them in a little basket thing and at the end of the night the manager took them. I think they were reused again and given out to others customers, like if you complained about a meal of something you'd get a $5 off next visit. Anyways, one employee was either stealing them or keeping them and started using them on random customers after they paid but keeping the tip amount the same. So if my meal was $20 and they tipped $4, he would use a $5 off coupon and enter that their total close-out amount was still $24 but he would get $9 as a tip. I guess he went a little overboard and management finally noticed his tip-out amounts weren't making sense. Long story short, he was fired and they threatened to sue because I believe he ended up stealing a couple $1,000s but I don't think they ever did. Storm Sam. Employees at bingo halls here in the UK are robbing them blind on a daily basis as they must be one of the only industries left that operate free, untraceable, printed vouchers with a cash value. I caught one guy stealing thousands on one of my first shifts as a manager. They actually printed the story with my name and address in the local paper, but after a while I realized that they treated employees so badly that I was going to leave in a hurry so I just turned a blind eye. Can't say I didn't redeem a few vouchers myself. If you want some free money, go in and grab a fistful of voucher booklets, cash in, they may give you digital credit, load it all into a machine and then just cash out, simple. Snarky Top. $37,500 in certificates, not quite $40,000. There is also a slight chance that the certificates were forgotten about or maybe a former manager had stored the certificates in the dry storage location and the new manager did not know about them. HDRE. You'd have to have a good concentration of stores in one area to earn back the expenses of driving round doing it these days. Especially when you split this between 2 and staying away from home. If you're keeping around $3 from each store you'd have to visit a few to make it worth more than just going to work in the first place. Wedge 1378. Can confirm. The 90s was a shit show of fraud for all teenagers. I had my own racket. I assumed that because before computers, paper records could easily be faked or basic math errors were made. Records took days or weeks to be processed. Probably throughout all of history this shit was going on if you were observant. Fence_post. Reminds me of my first job working at a golf course/clubhouse. I would drive a cart on the course that sold soda, water, juice. Beer was not allowed to be sold on the course so golfers would have to come to the clubhouse to get their drinks then take it with them, public course. They charged $1 for everything. So you can imagine tips didn't come easy because everyone had $1, nobody needed change, I was a male, I didn't have beer, and golfers were in a hurry. One day I decided to up the cost to $1.25. This would guarantee me 0.25 on each drink sold. This also led to a lot of golfers just saying, keep the change. So I was pulling $1 per almost every drink I sold. I was asked a lot if I had beer. Always said no. Couldn't do it. They kept the sodas/juice/water in the same cooler as the beer. When stocking the cart one day I grabbed a 6-pack and stuffed it in the bottom of my cooler. First set of guys who asked for beer that seemed cool I said I'm not supposed to, but I have a 6-pack I could sell. They asked how much and in my young mind I figured $10 for all 6 would be great. They had no issues doing that and looking back I could have probably said $20. That was straight profit since it wasn't inventoried on my cart. Best job ever. I was 15 at the time. Some of the most memorable days of my life those summers. Stu 8319. This reminds me of my friend who worked as a cashier at a burger joint here in town. He had some way of voiding transactions and keeping the change. I don't remember exactly how he did it, but one day his manager gave him a huge stack of paper that was a list of all of his voids for the month. He stopped doing it then and his manager just kind of let it slide. Ghosto Frog. It is not immoral in our society to steal from those who oppress us, and to be clear, fast food chains obliterating small business, health of the population, and the way they advertise is absolutely a form of oppression. Remember, big money is for itself, not the economy or the customer or their employees. Although TBH it sounds like a lot of work and I wouldn't bother, I'd just keep the coupons and eat indefinitely. Or give them away to some less fortunate people. Or just to people outside the store. Although I suppose every like 4 or 5 coupons, I'd have enough for cigarettes, so. Artie_Chokeshire. I got a whole lot of, this is great, smiles from your conquest of the multi-billion, soon to disappear dollar, fast food machine. I think you didn't even dent the machine. In fact, it is likely possible that the reason they were being discontinued is due to one very real fact. The actual change to the customer far outweighed the actual bottom line cost they paid for the actual product. Secondly, the abundance of these used in the past began the process, however slowly it became a concern for CPA or CFO on the P&L ledger. With the mentality of business and the bottom line being keep it in the black, keep it in the black. That's why they pulled these certificates or gift cards. Greedmongers got to always have more, and when they don't get more than what they want, they take steps to get what they need. I don't have one bit of sympathy at all for any of them, and I congratulate you on a very, very slick adventure at the cost of your manager's stupidity for inventory in the warehouse. Unless of course he stashed them there for his own gain, which is entirely a possibility. Karma is usually funny when it shows up. Congratulations. You got my kudos and have a great life, man. Thanks for sharing one hell of a fun ride.
The monster that married my mom. This is a story that happened when I was very young. It started around the time I was 5 back in the 80s and was the beginning of the worst 5 years of my life. I was a teenage unplanned pregnancy, so my mom was a single mom for the first few years of my life. It wasn't too bad though. My mom and I were not alone. We lived with my mom's parents, my grandparents. My mom's younger sister was also still living at home. We were safe and happy. Then my mom met a guy, let's call him Joe for privacy purposes. Joe seemed like a dream come true. He was nice to me and my mom. He took us places and brought us gifts. It was awesome, and when he proposed, my mom and I were both happy. They got married and my mom thought we would now be a happy family. We didn't know how wrong we were. It started off great. At first we had left my grandparents and moved into a home together. We had some really good times, but things took a turn for the worse after the first few months. Joe had a really bad temper and it would come out when my mom or I upset him. He would yell, throw things, and break stuff. Then he started hitting my mom and me. He would punch and kick us. He got worse and worse. He started beating me up to get back at my mom. It was a nightmare for 3 years. My mom was too scared to leave him or tell on him. I was too small when I told people, thought I was lying, because I wanted to go back to my grandparents' house. The weirdest thing was Joe was a lot like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. We had some really good times, vacations, holidays, and more. When he was nice it was amazing. When his other side came out it was hell. We did finally have something good and bad happen. My mom was pregnant. She was happy to be a mom again and I was excited to be a big brother. It was also bad though, because we were further tied to Joe and who knew what he would do to the baby. When my baby brother was born things were good for a while. We were pretty happy. I had withdrawn a lot though. I stayed in my room watching TV and reading. I figured out of sight out of mind. I thought if I avoided Joe he wouldn't bother me. I should have continued this plan, but I was blinded with the happiness and peace that came with my brother's birth. It all started back one day. Joe had a toothache and was in a foul mood. He had been yelling at my mom all day. My brother was teething and had been fussy, so Joe was extra grumpy, yelling at her to get the baby quiet. My mom called me to dinner and I walked out of my room. I was walking slowly and quietly, because I didn't want to make Joe any more upset. Well, I guess I went too slow and got in the way, because he got mad, yelled and threw the remote control and hit me in the side of the head and eye. It was terrible. I was bleeding and bruised. My mom had finally had enough and left him with me and my brother. We went to my grandparents' house. They took pictures of my eye and called the police, but they wouldn't do anything. Social services investigated, but they didn't do anything either. We were happy at my grandparents and safe, but Joe was very slick. He called my mom and said the right words, and after a while talked her into coming back with promises to be better. He actually was for a while, but then he went back to his old ways. He even tried to beat my brother. I took a lot of beatings for him, because I love him and wanted to protect him. It all came crashing down one December night when I was 9. My mom had forgotten to pay the phone bill and the phone got turned off. She was at work working a double second and third shifts, and Joe was due to go into the same plant for his third shift in a different department. He was enraged when he found out the phone was off. He dragged me out of bed and we drove up the store just up the road from our house. He called my mom at work on the pay phone. He was yelling and cussing at her about the phone bill. Then he said something that sent chills down my spine. He told her if she didn't get home in an hour he would kill me. I was terrified. We went back to the house and I went to my room. Joe kept ranting and raving. I was so scared he called me into the living room and attacked me. He was beating me with a belt all over. He grabbed me and threw me into a wall. He pulled the chin cabinet down on top of me. But he grabbed a broom and continued to beat me. The beating kept up on and off for several hours. I was in pain and covered in bruises and blood. It was time for him to go to work. He got dressed to go and told me that if I went to school in the morning he would beat me when I got home. I guess he knew with all my wounds the school would do something. I was scared, but I needed help. I couldn't change out of my pajamas, because I hurt too much. I slowly limped my way to my bus stop barefoot and still in my Incredible Hulk pajamas. The bus driver pulled up, opened the door, took one look at me and got me on the bus and immediately drove to school. Then everything moved so fast, before I knew it I was talking to social services and the police. They ended up taking me to my grandparents who got custody of me. I was happy to be with my grandparents whom I love and happy to be safe, but I missed my mom and my brother. Strangely enough, the police never did anything to my stepfather. It was a different time, I guess. It was a few more years before my mom got the courage and left him, but she finally did. She ended up meeting a high school sweetheart and getting remarried. She and my brother finally had a happy life like I did, and we were back in each other's life. I found out later that my stepfather had been orphaned at the young age of 5 when his parents and older sister died when his dad's small plane crashed. He was then raised by a very physically and mentally abusive aunt and uncle. It doesn't excuse what he did, but it explains it. I eventually ran into him on social media. I forgave him and let go of the anger and hurt I had been holding on to. He had gotten a lot of mental help and seemed to be doing good. I convinced my brother to talk to him, because Joe was his biological dad and Joe had found his mom's family and extended members of his dad's family whom he lost touch with when his parents died. I told my brother that it would be good for him to meet some of his family from his father's side as he had never met them. I don't know my dad at all and would have loved to have that connection. As Joe continued to change and work hard to be better, I strangely enough became his biggest cheerleader. He would come to me for advice or to get me to mediate between he and my brother if they bumped heads, as their relationship tended to be rocky. My brother is like my mom, he holds on to grudges a long time. I don't know who I am like, being willing to forgive and forget. I know some of you will think I am crazy for forgiving him and actually helping him, but it really brought me an inner peace, and also I took pity on him for what he had been through as a child. That kind of trauma could turn anyone into a monster. Which is why I went to lots of therapy to help me get over mine.
My girlfriend talks in her sleep. At first it was cute and hilarious to tell her what she said. It was harmless nonsense. The sky is folding, or we need to raise the ground. We talked the next day about if she remembered her dream, but she never did. I wish I knew what she meant by, we need to raise the ground. Some context, our nightly routine is for us to start out cuddling and then give up once it gets too hot. Then we're usually both on our sides, back to back. She would fall asleep before I do, and so I would hear the full range of her nightly musings. Honestly, at first I was eager to hear what she said. It was always funny to tell her and our friends what she would say while deep in the throes of REM. But now I'm done. I'd prefer she not talk anymore. How am I going to sleep after what happened last night? Last night around 11 p.m. she was asleep and I was still up reading. Back to back, I hear her mumble something under her breath. I couldn't quite make out what she said, but I lean over from my book to peek at her face and she is sleeping soundly. I return to my book, get absorbed back into its pages. At some point I fall asleep. Next thing I know, I'm woken up by my girlfriend talking at full volume. I open my eyes, and at some point in the night, both of us have turned to lay face to face. My girlfriend's eyes are wide open. She is staring right at me, mere inches from my face, but her eyes are vacuous, like she is looking through me. These eyes, man, it's like she was straining to widen them as much as possible. Those are the eyes I fell in love with, and right now they are scaring the absolute piss out of me. My heart rate skyrockets and chock full of adrenaline. I throw off the covers and jump out of bed. Looking at her, her eyes follow me like a painting, but her body stays still. For 1 second, I decided that my booklight was keeping her awake, and what she had said was, "Can you please turn that off?" Now out of bed and looking at her, she's not right. Her body hasn't moved, but her eyes dart from looking at me to looking around the room. I dare to ask her, "Are you all right?" No response. Those eyes look at me when I speak, though. They are now deadlocked, looking right into my eyes. Her breathing hasn't changed. That is asleep breathing for sure. That's when, while looking right at me, she says in a too deep voice, "Come back to bed, dearie." My girlfriend has never called me dearie before. We have pet names, sure, but they range from pumpkin, baby, to cupcake. Dearie sounds like something my grandmother would call me. I decide I'll get more information before I climb back into bed with a potentially possessed girlfriend. "Are you awake, sweetie?" No response. The eyes dart from me to the wall, to the door, and then the ceiling. I'm about to nope out of the room when her wide open eyes roll to the back of her head. The white from those eyes stands out in the dim radiance of the booklight. "No pupils in sight," she insists. Of course I'm awake, come back to bed with a subtle tap of the fingers on the comforter. Looking at her fingers now, I'm starting to come around. She's never sleepwalked before, surely she is awake now if she is moving her hands. But looking at her fingers, it is as though she is pretending to have control. They are all going in different directions, one finger pointing straight down and the others to the side. Those hands are not my girlfriend's hands. They are simulating normal movement as best they can, though. I say, "I'm going to get a drink of water, baby, be right back. Can I get you anything?" Fully planning to run out of the house the moment I'm over the threshold. But my normally agreeable and sweet girlfriend decides I'm not allowed to leave. As serious as cancer, she says in that too deep horror voice, "Take one step out of that door and I will rip out your throat and shit down your neck." Shocked but understanding the importance of not letting this beast know I am in trouble, I reply, "As interesting as a proposition as that is, I think I'm going to." And thinking quickly, I grab my water bottle from the nightstand. This doesn't please my girlfriend as she decides to start screaming and fingering her way towards me. It is a supernatural scream, so high-pitched and bird-like I feel as though my neighbors 3 houses down were going to ask us if they heard that last night. As fast as I can muster, I unscrew the lid and douse her in water. Like I knew what I was doing. Her eyes close, her garbled appendages normalize, and she is back asleep. I'm going to sleep on the couch for a while, maybe forever. She'll understand when she's awake. My hands tremble over the keyboard and I may have a concussion, so please forgive any typos or brevity of my update. It is the morning after my typically amenable and kind-hearted girlfriend's body was possessed in sleep by some malicious entity. I've been distant this morning, so she knows something is amiss, but obviously still reeling from the experience. I can't tell her yet that she tried to rip out my throat and shit down my neck. You understand? I'm tired. Obviously I didn't sleep last night, but I did stay up most of the night, with all of the lights on, feverishly clutching my water bottle in the living room. The demonic beast inside my GF managed to creep its way back into control sometime soon after I exited the room and pinned it closed with a dining room chair. Given her eye movements and the activation delay, my theory is that the beast is allowed control during REM. But what do I know? It spent most of the evening attempting to coax me back into the bedroom, this time with a pinch more emotional intelligence calling out to me in what was as close to my GF's normal voice as it could manage. "Come to bed, sweetie. Why are you sleeping on the couch again?" I decide I'm not going to validate this demon with a response, but moments later, the too deep, sinister voice is back. "If you don't open this door, I will slit the cat's throat." Fuck. I forgot about the cat. He's still in the bedroom, probably cowering in fear, hissing in the corner to no avail. My guess is that the cat is already dead, but what can I do? Let our beloved kitty be eaten alive by someone he trusts? I've seen enough horror movies to know that this is the moment I have to decide to do something dumb and heroic, or die on screen while everyone yells about how much of an idiot I am for opening the door. I may have a little more sympathy for these characters now. People thrust into impossible situations are forced to make impossible choices. Against my better judgment, I'm going to open the door, get the cat out of the room. I'm staring at the bedroom door now and notice something damp and muscly poking and prodding its way out from under the door. I point my phone's flashlight at it and realize it is my girlfriend's tongue. I catch myself experiencing an intrusive thought, wondering if she will want to know why her mouth is full of cat hair tomorrow. But this is perfect. I need to test out my new technique, a spray bottle full of sink water. I spray the tongue as it inchworms itself around the edge of the door, presumably looking for purchase on my human flesh. It immediately recoils and I hear the body inside collapse. Water is still a demon possession off switch, I decide, and immediately tear the chair away from holding the door locked. I don't even have time to think about whether I have holy water on tap. I need to act fast. Attempting to open the door now, my SO's unconscious body is blocking me from entering. It requires quite a bit of force to slide her ragdoll body behind the door so I can squeeze through. Trying not to look too closely at her, I realize now that she is sweating a black oily substance and the bed and floor are totally drenched. I realize the reason it was so difficult to open the door. The demon sweat is sticky. She may be stuck to the ground. Carefully avoiding stepping in the demon superglue, I'm now inside the bedroom. To my dismay, I don't see the cat right away. It makes sense. Frightened as hell, it must have crawled and hid under the bed. Yikes. I've got to persuade it out from under there now, but that will mean I need to get down on my belly and reach under the bed. Realizing the absurdity of my situation, I have one hand pointing a spray bottle at my dead-asleep girlfriend and one hand reaching under the bed to grab my cat. My eyes trained on my GF, I reach blindly under the dark bed. I can feel its soft fur. I wrap my hand around it and attempt to bring it towards me. It wriggles free from my grasp with evidently zero intention of making this easy. It crawls deeper under the bed. Frustrated, I take my eyes off my girlfriend to look where it went. No sign of it. I make the call to put the spray bottle down and point my phone flashlight under the bed. It's too deep underneath for me to get it from this side. I'm going to need to go around to the other side to capture it. Pulling my head back out from underneath the bed, I realize my fatal error. My girlfriend has woken up. She is standing over me, a dark tower, as I lay vulnerable on the ground beside the bed. Her teeth look sharper from this angle in my phone's flashlight. Why didn't I turn on the bedroom light? She is drooling that black oily glue. Her hair, normally a gorgeous brown, is so glossed with black paste that it has slicked itself to her head like she just got out of the shower. Her eyes are menacing, wide open, bloodshot and yellow. She looks tired. I'm tired too. But it's time to go. The cat heroics can wait. Just as I'm about to scuttle an adrenaline-filled crawl around her legs and out the open door, she grabs both ankles with both of her arms. I remember her typically gentle touch is nowhere to be found in this grip as her nails dig shallow wounds into my legs. With inhuman strength, she begins raising my entire body weight by my legs, plainly in an attempt to start eating me alive from the toes up. Little does she know I've never skipped a leg day in my life. I kicked my girlfriend square in her teeth with both feet. She drops me on my head, but I can't feel it. While she is stunned, I manage to get to my feet, carefully avoid the preternatural spiderweb paste and exit the room. Hands shaking, I adjust the chair to the correct angle just in time to hear agitated knocking on the other side. Baby, come back to bed, it's late. You're going to be so tired at work tomorrow. All of that, and I didn't even get the damn cat out? And my spray bottle is still in there. What the hell am I going to do now? Here's what I know. The possession ends when she wakes up. Did any of that really happen? She has no recollection of the previous night. Water disables, but only momentarily, 2-3 minutes. The black ooze she drools and sweats while possessed evaporates. The bed and floor were wet this morning from the water I sprayed. The rest had all disappeared by the time I checked. The cat is fine. I need help. She's taking work calls in the other room. I'm doing my best to focus on my own work, but my mind drifts from my laptop screen. I can't focus. Agreeing to myself that I won't get anything worthwhile done today, I give up and start thinking about next steps. I need an exorcist. I'm not the kind to call an exorcist. I'm the kind of guy that scoffs at the idea they are all scams. You can't have experience in something that doesn't exist. Clearly I am not the religious type, but I'll table my reservations for now. I'm not going to go through all of that again on my own. Feeling totally out of my element, but unwilling to call a church, I found an exorcist on Craigslist. Price is no object. Let's get this thing out of my girlfriend. He says he'll come over tonight. He messages me and says it is of utmost importance that my GF's waking body does not find out what we are going to do. If she does find out and is not be able to fall asleep, no refunds. How much more could I expect from a Craigslist exorcist? I'm certainly not thrilled with the idea of a stranger knowing my address, but I'm not backing out now. As you can imagine, this is the slowest slog of a day I have ever experienced in my life. I am anxious, I feel physically sick, I jump at everything my girlfriend says. I can't look in her eyes without imagining that eerie, yellow tinge behind them. Around lunchtime, I hear her humming happily in the kitchen. She really has no idea, does she? A profound sense of certain death washes over me as I watch her wield a knife to cut vegetables. Finally, the workday is over. My acting this evening was on par with any Oscar winner. Remembering what The Exorcist told me and failing to come up with an excuse, I got into bed with her. I made sure to place the cat in a comfortable spot in the living room. We're reading side by side when she leans over, kisses me goodnight, my eyes open, and turns out her bedside table light. I'm going to keep mine on for now, thank you. My body tense with desire to bolt, we begin to spoon. She cannot learn that something is wrong. Just a little longer. I figure I'm safe as long as I exit before she is asleep. She raises her head and asks, "Why is your heart beating so fast?" Thinking quickly, just freaked myself out by my book is all. Maybe reading horror before bed isn't the best decision. Thankfully, she laughs at my obsession for the macabre and returns her head to the pillow. I count down from 3 minutes. That's 180 Mississippis. She must have been close to asleep because she didn't protest when I get up. I install the chair as my lock and wait. "Where are you, pumpkin? Can't you sleep?" This is so close to my girlfriend's voice, I'm certain I made the whole thing up. I'll play it safe, I decide, and not respond. Again, "It's cold without you, baby. Come back to bed." I'm sure it's cold as hell where this thing is from. I'm not opening the door. There's someone coming up the driveway. It's late. Don't let them in. I stand up to answer the front door. Outside in the dim front door light is a tall man clad in traditional priest garb. He looks like Ethan Hawke from that movie First Reformed, but clearly with a body covered in tattoos, as evidenced by the inked skin poking out from beneath his cuffs. Pretty much exactly what you would expect from a Craigslist's exorcist. There's not much time to introduce ourselves as we hear an alarming scrape come from the bedroom. I take this moment to read the priest's face and check if he actually has experience with this. He seems to at least be brave, his face giving no indication that he is wearing a costume for a quick buck. Outside of the bedroom door now, in hushed tones, he begins to explain what he is going to do. Brandishing a Bible and a small jar of holy water, I decide not to explain that sink water works fine. We're about to open the door. Hands on the chair, I hear scraping again. This time I realize the sound was never coming from the bedroom. It came from the living room. To my left, I hear the stranger breath out softly. The cat. The cat has been watching us this whole time. Its normally green eyes now bloodshot and yellow. No pupils in sight, poking out from around the corner. Black paste drooling from its agape mouth, leaving a snail trail of fluid behind it as it stalks out into the open. It attempts to hiss while making eye contact with the priest, but all that comes out is a bubbling gurgle as more fluid leaks onto the hardwood. Are the cat's legs longer than usual? It looks like it has grown 5 inches in height, typically sitting around ankle level, but right now could stand as high as my knees. I curse quietly to myself. How could I have been so stupid? Of course the cat managed to get itself possessed. It spent the whole night in the bedroom, presumably mopping up the viscous black oil, wet food, with its mouth. New plan? Cat first. I shit you not, the cat fucking talks. Its mouth doesn't move from its totally agape resting position, but the voice comes out of its mouth. It's that same too deep nightmare voice I'm all too familiar with. I told you not to let him in. Just then my girlfriend decides she needs attention again. A consistent rapping of knuckles on the door. Let me out, let me out, let me out. I'm triaging this situation in my mind when I realize the moment I took my eyes off of the cat, it has rocketed itself forward, climbed the priest's tall body, wrapped its 2 long legs around his neck and constricts him like a snake. It maintains dull eye contact with me as I look on in horror. The priest drops his Bible and holy water on the ground, attempting to tear the cat's octopus-like legs away from his neck. He succeeds momentarily and cites what I assume is a Bible verse. The cat puts a stop to this with a quick navigation of its tail deep down into the priest's throat. Coughing and hysterical, he can't manage to escape its impossible grip, claws digging bloody fissures into his neck. My turn as I grab the holy water from the ground and grapple with the cat's jaw, pouring the contents of the jar down its slime-obstructed throat. Immediately, the cat falls to the ground like a corpse. Legs splayed in every direction, it lays on the ground, defeated for now. Once the cat is safely inside its travel carrier, the priest and I share a grim look. I ask him if he's ever dealt with this kind of thing before. Rubbing his neck, of course, 1,000 times. It takes a great deal of conviction for me to not physically roll my eyes. Glad to have you around, then. Slime tendrils seek blind escape from air holes in the side of my travel carrier as I explain to the priest not to swallow any of the black liquid. I think there may not be much hope for him now that my cat's tail has penetrated deep into his throat. But we can discuss this later. My train of thought is interrupted by the sobbing harassment of a girlfriend possessed in the bedroom. You don't love me. You never loved me. The doorknob shakes with dreadful force, tremors ringing through the hallway. Fingers emerge at the bottom of the door, viscous oil dripping from under splotched fingernails. Open this door or I kill the girl. The fingers vanish. A pause, breaking glass from inside the room. Is it planning to jump out of the window? Surely it is bluffing, we are on the 3rd floor. Like any parasitic creature, it wouldn't gravely harm its precious host. There is a renewed sense of urgency at this threat, but I am at a loss. We poured holy water down the cat's throat, but its body has already turned into an abomination I can only describe as the alien from The Thing. I wonder to myself if one of those squirming legs is going to detach, sprout a blinking eyeball, and hide in the vent. I feel helpless. I can't stay up all night misting my girlfriend like she is a damn pet chameleon for the rest of my life. Still out of breath from being choked by my cat, the priest manages to wheeze. We need to open the door. What will we do? Water stops her, but only for a minute. It's too dangerous to perform the rites while she is in this form. We'll get her in the shower and then restrain her. This is a good idea. Why didn't I think of that? Feeling a touch more brave as the priest increasingly proves himself as an asset, I begin to remove the chair. Thank you, baby. Why did you lock me in here? I have been so scared. My subconscious will forever be unwilling to separate the pleas of a demonic beast from the genuine pleas of my loving girlfriend. I hesitate, but with effort manage to shrug off this false appeal for normalcy. Chair in hand, I take a step back from the door. For a single beat, there is silence. The latch clicks. She is opening the door. Shining black slicked hair emerges, covering her face in totality through the crack in the door. She seems to have gained several inches in height as her full form comes into view. Then a single ringed yellow eye reveals itself through her long hair. I search in that eye for some sign that she is still in there, somewhere. Anywhere. She is wielding a broken shard of glass and holding it to her own wrist. There is no time for protest before the priest has already sprayed her down. Her frenzied dodge is thwarted as a second jet of water dampens the pajamas my mother bought her for Christmas. I will never forget the powerlessness I felt in the next few moments. With only a few seconds left of control, the demon cuts my girlfriend's hand cruelly at the wrist with the shard of glass. That not being enough, she gnaws the rest off with her mouth. Completely dismembered, her hand splashes to the ground in a grotesque murky puddle of blood and oil. Stunned, I witness a transformation of the human body before me. Her body shakes globally and erratically on the ground as her skin regains its color. I remember a classmate from school who had seizures and that we needed to protect her head, but I am incapacitated. The priest doesn't take time to emotionally reckon the fact that my girlfriend just lost her non-dominant hand. He scoops her up, rushes her to the shower, and turns on the water. A mixture of shell shock and a concussion leave me standing idle while I stare in slow motion from the severed fist to the shower, back to the bedroom. The beast has been proficiently turning our bedroom into some kind of nest. The walls, windows, and ceiling are painted in black as night paste with the consistency of spoiled milk. Dripping from the ceiling fan onto the bed, our furniture is unrecognizable in the spiderweb of fluid coating the room. The priest is washing his hands in the bathroom sink. He comes and stands before me, shaking me at the shoulders, evidently having been demanding things of me for the last few seconds. Anybody home? We need to act. I need your help. Now, I come back to reality. The priest now gritting his teeth and manic at my seeming inability to cope with the fact that life will never go back to normal. Do you have any rope or handcuffs, anything to restrain her with? I have some bungee cords down in my car. I'll get them. I sprint to the stairs and bellow down them 3 at a time. Grabbing the keys off the hook, I run to the car, locate the bungee cords in the trunk, and rush back upstairs. The priest has torn apart our medical cabinet, looking to apply first aid to my girlfriend's arm, and is applying pressure as I approach. I frantically tie a single bungee cord as a makeshift tourniquet to slow the bleeding. We carry her lifeless body to the bed and restrain her to the frame, both legs and one arm. Her head hangs limp. I wonder how long it will be before she turns back into that monster. But then she wakes up. She looks up at me totally disoriented, then cries desperately as the pain sets in. It's okay, baby, it's okay. I know this is bad. Believe me, we are working on it. There is a lump in my throat as I sit down on the bed, repeatedly kissing her on the forehead and attempting to assuage the impossible. She is in so much pain. I almost want the monster to take back control so that she cannot feel it anymore. Mercifully, she faints. Eyes still open, I point her chin up towards me and watch as that hollowness returns. From brown to yellow, her pupils go opaque in their descent into madness once again. Tears and blood still on her face, she smiles. It is over. You have failed. Amen. That too familiar deep voice reverberates through a sinister grin. How is this winning in the eyes of this creature? It is restrained, more so than before. It knows something we don't. Something moves in my peripheral. It is my girlfriend's severed hand, fingers padding across the floor like a spider. A trail of sludge follows it as it reaches its destination. The spray bottle. It senses that we have seen it, its form turning to look at us with no ability to see. The hand leaps, tackling the spray bottle and tumbling awkwardly down the stairs. I am speechless. We have to go after it. We can't let it get outside of the house. Violent thrashing from the bedroom. The priest, the knots are holding. You go after the hand, I will perform the rites. Running down the stairs, I hear the distant murmurings of the ritual. Lord above, Redeemer of the world, have mercy on us. It's just a hand. It couldn't have gone far. It could have let the cat out. It could be worse. It could be worse. I turn on the lights as I go. It's on the first floor. I tiptoe over black slime, extra cautious so as to not get any on me. I'm reminded of the time my pet snake escaped, and my girlfriend and I spent an entire afternoon looking for it. But looking for a snake isn't like looking for a cat. Cats can get underneath and above objects. Snakes can get inside of objects. A hand could be anywhere. In between the couch cushions, inside the laundry machines, it could already be outside. I have it cornered. It's behind the refrigerator. I act like I haven't noticed the trail of slime leading right there, and walk as casually as possible to the cabinet to fill a glass of water. My weapon is at the ready. I walk to the side of the refrigerator and peek behind it. Nothing. Suddenly, a pronged silhouette covers the kitchen light. Pouncing like an insect, the hand leaps from the top of the refrigerator. The perfect height to land right on my face. The hand, still wearing my girlfriend's class ring, attaches to my head, pulling my hair until it clenches a vice grip with a thumb behind my top layer of teeth. Pressing pointer and ring finger into each eye socket, I drop my glass on the ground. It takes both hands to remove the hand from my face and throw it as hard as I can against the wall. My vision blurred, I pick my girlfriend's disoriented hand up from the ground and run water over it in the sink. I splash water in my face and wash out my mouth as best I can. Harried, I fill a cooler with ice and water and throw the hand inside. I run back upstairs, hoping, maybe praying, that the priest did his job. It is silent except for the demonic mewls of the cat in the other room. The priest is hulking over my girlfriend, muttering something under his breath as he cradles the Bible in one hand, and his fingers point in all directions in the other. Noticing me, he hurriedly shuts his Bible, but seeing one of the pages, I note that it is in fact not a Bible at all. Inside are what I can only imagine demonic scrawls and symbols would look like. But the priest has done his job, he says. The demon has left her. Carefully placing my girlfriend in the back seat, I yell back to the priest. I'll pay him when we get back. Putting on my seatbelt, I look out the window and note a tattoo on his arm similar to a symbol I saw in the false Bible. Driving to the hospital like a husband would if his wife had gone into labor. I wonder if you can surgically reattach a hand like you can a finger. Then I wonder if the hand even should be reattached. Do I need to ask the priest to perform pious rituals to just a hand? My girlfriend talks in her sleep. At first it was cute and hilarious to tell her what she said. It was harmless nonsense. The sky is folding, or we need to raise the ground. We talked the next day about if she remembered her dream, but she never did. I wish I knew what she meant by, we need to raise the ground. Some context, our nightly routine is for us to start out cuddling and then give up once it gets too hot. Then we're usually both on our sides, back to back. She would fall asleep before I do, and so I would hear the full range of her nightly musings. Honestly, at first I was eager to hear what she said. It was always funny to tell her and our friends what she would say while deep in the throes of REM. But now I'm done, I'd prefer she not talk anymore. How am I going to sleep after what happened last night? Last night around 11 p.m. she was asleep and I was still up reading. Back to back, I hear her mumble something under her breath. I couldn't quite make out what she said, but I lean over from my book to peek at her face and she is sleeping soundly. I return to my book, get absorbed back into its pages. At some point I fall asleep. Next thing I know, I'm woken up by my girlfriend talking at full volume. I open my eyes, and at some point in the night, both of us have turned to lay face to face. My girlfriend's eyes are wide open. She is staring right at me, mere inches from my face, but her eyes are vacuous, like she is looking through me. These eyes, man, it's like she was straining to widen them as much as possible. Those are the eyes I fell in love with, and right now they are scaring the absolute piss out of me. My heart rate skyrockets and chock full of adrenaline. I throw off the covers and jump out of bed. Looking at her, her eyes follow me like a painting, but her body stays still. For 1 second, I decided that my booklight was keeping her awake, and what she had said was, "Can you please turn that off?" Now out of bed and looking at her, she's not right. Her body hasn't moved, but her eyes dart from looking at me to looking around the room. I dare to ask her, "Are you all right?" No response. Those eyes look at me when I speak, though. They are now deadlocked, looking right into my eyes. Her breathing hasn't changed. That is a sleep breathing for sure. That's when, while looking right at me, she says in a too deep voice, "Come back to bed, dearie." My girlfriend has never called me dearie before. We have pet names, sure, but they range from pumpkin, baby, to cupcake. Dearie sounds like something my grandmother would call me. I decide I'll get more information before I climb back into bed with a potentially possessed girlfriend. "Are you awake, sweetie?" No response. The eyes dart from me to the wall, to the door, and then the ceiling. I'm about to nope out of the room when her wide open eyes roll to the back of her head. The white from those eyes stands out in the dim radiance of the booklight. "No pupils in sight," she insists. Of course I'm awake, come back to bed with a subtle tap of the fingers on the comforter. Looking at her fingers now, I'm starting to come around. She's never sleepwalked before, surely she is awake now if she is moving her hands. But looking at her fingers, it is as though she is pretending to have control. They are all going in different directions, one finger pointing straight down and the others to the side. Those hands are not my girlfriend's hands. They are simulating normal movement as best they can, though. I say, I'm going to get a drink of water, baby, be right back. Can I get you anything? Fully planning to run out of the house the moment I'm over the threshold. But my normally agreeable and sweet girlfriend decides I'm not allowed to leave. As serious as cancer, she says in that too deep horror voice, take one step out of that door and I will rip out your throat and shit down your neck. Shocked but understanding the importance of not letting this beast know I am in trouble, I reply, as interesting as a proposition as that is, I think I'm going to. And thinking quickly, I grab my water bottle from the nightstand. This doesn't please my girlfriend as she decides to start screaming and fingering her way towards me. It is a supernatural scream, so high-pitched and bird-like I feel as though my neighbors 3 houses down were going to ask us if they heard that last night. As fast as I can muster, I unscrew the lid and douse her in water. Like I knew what I was doing. Her eyes close, her garbled appendages normalize, and she is back asleep. I'm going to sleep on the couch for a while, maybe forever. She'll understand when she's awake. My hands tremble over the keyboard and I may have a concussion, so please forgive any typos or brevity of my update. It is the morning after my typically amenable and kind-hearted girlfriend's body was possessed in sleep by some malicious entity. I've been distant this morning, so she knows something is amiss, but obviously still reeling from the experience. I can't tell her yet that she tried to rip out my throat and shit down my neck. You understand? I'm tired. Obviously I didn't sleep last night, but I did stay up most of the night, with all of the lights on, feverishly clutching my water bottle in the living room. The demonic beast inside my GF managed to creep its way back into control sometime soon after I exited the room and pinned it closed with a dining room chair. Given her eye movements and the activation delay, my theory is that the beast is allowed control during REM. But what do I know? It spent most of the evening attempting to coax me back into the bedroom, this time with a pinch more emotional intelligence calling out to me in what was as close to my GF's normal voice as it could manage. Come to bed, sweetie. Why are you sleeping on the couch again? I decide I'm not going to validate this demon with a response, but moments later, the too deep, sinister voice is back. If you don't open this door, I will slit the cat's throat. Fuck. I forgot about the cat. He's still in the bedroom, probably cowering in fear, hissing in the corner to no avail. My guess is that the cat is already dead, but what can I do? Let our beloved kitty be eaten alive by someone he trusts? I've seen enough horror movies to know that this is the moment I have to decide to do something dumb and heroic, or die on screen while everyone yells about how much of an idiot I am for opening the door. I may have a little more sympathy for these characters now. People thrust into impossible situations are forced to make impossible choices. Against my better judgment, I'm going to open the door, get the cat out of the room. I'm staring at the bedroom door now and notice something damp and muscly poking and prodding its way out from under the door. I point my phone's flashlight at it and realize it is my girlfriend's tongue. I catch myself experiencing an intrusive thought, wondering if she will want to know why her mouth is full of cat hair tomorrow. But this is perfect. I need to test out my new technique, a spray bottle full of sink water. I spray the tongue as it inchworms itself around the edge of the door, presumably looking for purchase on my human flesh. It immediately recoils and I hear the body inside collapse. Water is still a demon possession off switch, I decide, and immediately tear the chair away from holding the door locked. I don't even have time to think about whether I have holy water on tap. I need to act fast. Attempting to open the door now, my SO's unconscious body is blocking me from entering. It requires quite a bit of force to slide her ragdoll body behind the door so I can squeeze through. Trying not to look too closely at her, I realize now that she is sweating a black oily substance and the bed and floor are totally drenched. I realize the reason it was so difficult to open the door. The demon sweat is sticky. She may be stuck to the ground. Carefully avoiding stepping in the demon superglue, I'm now inside the bedroom. To my dismay, I don't see the cat right away. It makes sense. Frightened as hell, it must have crawled and hid under the bed. Yikes. I've got to persuade it out from under there now, but that will mean I need to get down on my belly and reach under the bed. Realizing the absurdity of my situation, I have one hand pointing a spray bottle at my dead-asleep girlfriend and one hand reaching under the bed to grab my cat. My eyes trained on my GF, I reach blindly under the dark bed. I can feel its soft fur. I wrap my hand around it and attempt to bring it towards me. It wriggles free from my grasp with evidently zero intention of making this easy. It crawls deeper under the bed. Frustrated, I take my eyes off my girlfriend to look where it went. No sign of it. I make the call to put the spray bottle down and point my phone flashlight under the bed. It's too deep underneath for me to get it from this side. I'm going to need to go around to the other side to capture it. Pulling my head back out from underneath the bed, I realize my fatal error. My girlfriend has woken up. She is standing over me, a dark tower, as I lay vulnerable on the ground beside the bed. Her teeth look sharper from this angle in my phone's flashlight. Why didn't I turn on the bedroom light? She is drooling that black oily glue. Her hair, normally a gorgeous brown, is so glossed with black paste that it has slicked itself to her head like she just got out of the shower. Her eyes are menacing, wide open, bloodshot and yellow. She looks tired. I'm tired too. But it's time to go. The cat heroics can wait. Just as I'm about to scuttle an adrenaline-filled crawl around her legs and out the open door, she grabs both ankles with both of her arms. I remember her typically gentle touch is nowhere to be found in this grip as her nails dig shallow wounds into my legs. With inhuman strength, she begins raising my entire body weight by my legs, plainly in an attempt to start eating me alive from the toes up. Little does she know I've never skipped a leg day in my life. I kicked my girlfriend square in her teeth with both feet. She drops me on my head, but I can't feel it. While she is stunned, I manage to get to my feet, carefully avoid the preternatural spiderweb paste and exit the room. Hands shaking, I adjust the chair to the correct angle just in time to hear agitated knocking on the other side. Baby, come back to bed, it's late, you're going to be so tired at work tomorrow. All of that, and I didn't even get the damn cat out? And my spray bottle is still in there. What the hell am I gonna do now?
11 years ago, during a silent winter night in Iowa, this true story, a teen and friend encounter a chilling presence mimicking his mother's voice while she's out. As they investigate, they're confronted with an eerie darkness and unsettling silence. Upon realizing his mother isn't home, they feel a malevolent force lurking, prompting them to stay put. Even after his mother's return, the unsettling atmosphere persists, leaving them shaken by the inexplicable encounter.
Not my mother. So this story happened about 11 years ago. I was a senior in high school at the time, but it is the single most mind-boggling thing that I have ever experienced. It's also important to note that it happened in mid-December. I am from Iowa, and the winters here get cold at night, like if you get stuck outside you will die kind of cold. That plus the snowfall makes everything dead silent. You can hear anything and everything inside the house and even immediately outside of it. Well, me and my best friend were hanging out in my family's walkout basement, just having a boring winter night playing video games. We were also the only ones home. The reason it was just us is because my mother went from work straight to a bar to grab a few drinks with coworkers, so me and my friend thought it would be a good idea to break into the family wine and live a little. As we were sitting there opening up the first bottle, I hear the door to the garage open and slam shut. I immediately go oh shit and start looking for places to hide the bottle. My friend then says, "I thought you said your mom was supposed to be out all night." "She was," I replied. I then heard a few heavy stomps and hear my mother yell out, "Mio Sanbo. Anyone home?" I yell back up the stairs, "Yup. Just hanging out in the basement." I hear a few more steps move from the garage door towards the stairs and she yells out again, "Can you come help me with something? I need you up here." I reply back while frantically trying to find a good place to hide the wine bottle, "Yup. Give me just a minute." Then there was silence for about 20 seconds. "Anyone down there with you?" She yelled back in a more concerned, serious tone, in a voice that was slightly off of my mother's. This was the first thing that told me something wasn't right. Our family never cared if anyone was over, as our house was a very open house to all family and friends, and the voice, it was just wrong, like it sounded like my mother's, but it was missing something that I couldn't out my finger on. Weirded out, I reply back, "Just Colton." After I yelled that back to her, I found a good place to hide the bottle and began walking up the steps to the next level. Now as I was walking up the steps, I couldn't help but feel the overbearing silence of the house, and the slight electric twinge that something isn't right. When I got to the top of the steps, I look over to where the door to garage is and also the kitchen right next to it, and it's black, pitch black, all if the lights were off, and there was no moonlight shining through any windows. I walked over to the kitchen yelling out, "Mom. Where are you?" There was no reply, just silence and darkness. I feel the electric twinge turn into full needles, and my adrenaline kicking in full force. I have to get out of here as fast as possible. My mother was not home. I run back down the stairs grabbing my coat along the way. "What's wrong?" Colton says, "My mom's not home." I reply as fast as I can, looking for my truck keys. "What do you mean? You were just talking with her." I could see the confusion in his face. "There's no one home, we need to leave now." I took a few steps towards the back door that opens up to the yard, and then I see my dog shaking on the couch, and my cat growling behind it. I couldn't leave them, I just knew that if we left something would happen. "Are we leaving?" Colton said, still confused as all hell. "No, I can't leave them here alone, something is really off, I'm going to call my mom and figure this out." I pull out my phone and call my mom. She picks up immediately. "Mio-san, what's going on?" She answers, "Mom, were you just home? I heard you yelling for me from the second level, and when I went up you weren't there." I said frantically, hoping that she was playing a joke. "No, I'm just leaving the bar, I wasn't feeling very well, are you okay?" "What do you mean you heard me?" I fill her in on the whole story and she rushes home. Colton and I stayed in the basement with the animals until she got home, but before she did you could hear something upstairs, not walking or sitting on things, but a pressure in the air, like a black hole was slowly moving from one room to the next, and the word that I would instinctively describe it as is hungry. When she got home you could feel the thing leave just as quick as it came, like an overbearing predatory presence had just flown away. We still have never figured out what the hell was going on, and this is just one story of many unexplainable things that have happened to us, but this is the easiest to write down, and one that I was happy to have a witness. My mother has passed away now, and I have moved away to Arizona, but whenever I go back to Iowa and I see Colton he still gets creeped out by what had happened. I will never truly know what happened, but I know that whatever it was that had my mother's voice, it was evil, and it was hungry. Pasalsu. I had a similar experience a few years ago. I was living in an apartment with my husband, 2-year-old daughter, and our cats. My husband had left for work and I was packing the diaper bag in the kitchen with my daughter. I heard movement towards our bedroom and thought maybe my husband had stepped back in when I was paying attention, and then heard my husband say, "Babe," which is odd because he never calls me that. My daughter starts to run to our room to him, so I grab her arm and just yell back, "What?" with a response of, "Babe, come here." Our cats were in the hallway towards our bedroom with their hackles raised and tails poofed. The entire place felt bad. My daughter and I stayed out until my husband got home from work. Beth 944. I used to live in this old house that had the same issues. I never felt anything sinister about it. But I would hear my mom come home and speak to her just to find out she wasn't there. I always just assumed it was my mind playing tricks on me. The way your story sounds though, definitely was a little creepier. It only happened in that house. My sister would experience it too, but it only happened when we were alone. Sometimes the door in the hallway that had towels in it would open. I never related it to anything other than I'm just imagining things lol. We've all since moved away and I'm in a completely different city now. Definitely post another story. I'd be interested to read it. Slane. I have experienced a lot of supernatural things from the day I was born as to today, and all my family members have a history with the unexplained things. What happened with your mom has happened to me and my sister a lot of times. One time in our old house, first house, we would hear the sound of our drunk father that came late at night. We would hear the sound of keys, the sound of the door open and close, and every time he would come we were asleep. He was abusive, so he wouldn't talk to us, but one night we heard him, except he didn't. Had came home after a while. We got up and look around the house. No one was there except us. And another time, until now, I hear my mother come home, I hear her car, her footsteps, the door, even her voice, but nothing. What I wrote is the most similar experience I have lived to your story. That I have 1,000 stories from me and my family members. It doesn't help when you can sense things or predict the future or feel what others feel. That I am the strongest to feel those things, but my mother and aunt are also very sensitive. I hope it wasn't too difficult to read. English isn't my first language and I hope it wasn't boring. If have you read until the end? I hope you are okay and know that there are others that have experiences like you. Slightly smiling face.
Let's hear the user stories and comments also.
During my childhood, I have fond memories of frequent visits to the community pool alongside my mother. While she engaged in water aerobics with other mothers, I and fellow kids amused ourselves in the shallow end. The pool boasted various amenities like slides, pool noodles, and vibrant murals, enhancing its appeal. Notably, there was a captivating jungle cave section where water jets created bubbling effects, accompanied by colored lights and jungle-themed sounds. To my youthful mind, this spot held unparalleled allure. However, despite its charm, the pool's construction left much to be desired. I vividly recall an incident where a segment of the concrete wall detached, striking me at the base of my skull and rendering me unconscious. Amidst fleeting moments of consciousness underwater, I remember the disorienting green light and the sensation of struggling for breath as water filled my lungs. It wasn't until blood emerged due to the water jets that my predicament was noticed. I had endured approximately 4.5 minutes without oxygen before rescue ensued. This ordeal resulted in the permanent loss of my sense of taste, medically termed ageusia. Strangely, this seemingly minor consequence of brain injury has had a significant impact on my life. For instance, the last taste I recall experiencing was that of strawberry mint gum, given to me by my mother in the changing room. Even now, after many years, the memory lingers, triggered by the sight of pink and green combinations. While I can still perceive textures, the inability to discern sweet from sour or salty from savory remains frustrating. Additionally, my capacity to sense spice, albeit as discomfort rather than taste, remains intact. Following the accident, my family's circumstances changed drastically. My mother engaged in a legal battle with the local authorities, prompting our relocation from Chatter Blinds, New England, to Juniper, West Virginia. My father secured employment in sheet metal work, while my mother found part-time employment at a travel agency. This transition disrupted my budding social life, and by the time I reached high school, I had assimilated into the crowd, my New England accent fading into obscurity. High school presented its challenges, particularly for a tasteless individual amidst the early 2000s. Instances of cruelty, such as someone surreptitiously adding dishwasher powder to my food, became commonplace. My attempt to relate by expressing affection for Classic Coke inadvertently earned me the derogatory moniker Classic Coke, or CC, which gradually evolved into derogatory slurs over time. Allow me to recount my final year of high school. As autumn unfolded, our physical education sessions were relocated to the indoor pool, where we focused on CPR training and swimming drills. I harbored hopes of avoiding these sessions, not only due to reluctance to reveal myself in swim trunks, but also due to an innate discomfort around water. Standing or being near water heightened my awareness of breathing, triggering palpitations. This sensation, perhaps psychosomatic, bordered on a mild phobia. Despite my attempts to evade participation, my gym teacher, Mr. Bauer, insisted on compliance, mandating a doctor's note for exemption. Appeals to his compassion proved futile. Lacking personal swim gear, I begrudgingly donned ill-fitting loner attire, evidently neglected for years, its fabric acquiring an unpleasant crustiness. The initial session proved disastrous. I endured ridicule as I attempted CPR on a training dummy, selected due to my supposed indifference to tasting plastic. Subsequent swimming exercises revealed my inability to venture into the deep end, prompting mockery from classmates. Attempts to relocate a bothersome big mouth Billy Bass toy fell on deaf ears, dismissed as inconsequential. The subsequent session exacerbated my distress. Forced into the deep end, I experienced a panic attack, struggling to draw breath. Despite my pleas for help, I was dragged to the shallow end, clinging to Mr. Bauer for reassurance. Subsequent sessions seemed inevitable, until an unexpected illness provided reprieve. Pretending illness by ingesting dish soap, I relished a respite at home, indulging in leisure activities typically reserved for rainy days. Upon returning to class, I faced the prospect of completing the missed session. However, fate intervened as the pool closure, attributed to a groundwater leak post-geological event, was revealed. Subsequent events unraveled a mysterious narrative. Several classmates, apprehended for trespassing at the pool, piqued my curiosity. Subtle whispers hinted at clandestine activities, prompting vigilance. Core cliques extended invitations to underclassmen, fostering a sense of inclusion in enigmatic endeavors linked to the pool. Reports of peculiar behaviors, such as ingesting dark purple powder, further fueled intrigue. Desperate for insight, I sought guidance from sympathetic peers, only to encounter resistance. Suspicions mounted as clandestine meetings and surreptitious acquisitions hinted at covert undertakings. Locked in a state of uncertainty, I remained on the periphery, unable to decipher the clandestine activities centered around the pool. Events unfolded rapidly, culminating in a transformative encounter. Prompted by curiosity, I ventured into the pool area, guided by an enigmatic classmate. Our clandestine journey through a maintenance passage culminated in a surreal revelation. Emerging into the pool area, I beheld a surreal tableau. The pool, devoid of its plastic cover, teemed with dirt and flowers, while an imposing sea creature, previously dormant, commanded attention. Engulfed in a bluish hue, the cavernous pool resonated with a sense of foreboding, its depths concealing untold mysteries. Drawing closer, I discerned the form of my classmates, their eyes fixated on the creature, oblivious to my presence. Mesmerized by the creature's hypnotic gaze, I succumbed to its allure, drawn into its depths. Amidst a cacophony of whispers, I experienced a revelation, unlocking forgotten memories buried within the recesses of my mind. Recollections flooded my consciousness, illuminating the truth obscured by layers of deception. The pool, a conduit for arcane energies, held sway over our destinies, its depths concealing ancient secrets. Guided by intuition, I unearthed fragments of a forgotten past, piecing together the puzzle of our intertwined fates. Emerging from the depths, I beheld a transformed reality, infused with newfound purpose. United by shared experiences, we embarked on a journey of self-discovery, guided by the wisdom of ages past. As the sun set on the horizon, casting an ethereal glow upon the world, I embraced the unknown, ready to confront the challenges that lay ahead. With each step, we forged a path illuminated by the light of truth, our spirits intertwined in a timeless dance of destiny. Thus concludes the tale of our journey into the unknown, a testament to the enduring power of friendship, courage, and the boundless potential of the human spirit.